All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Why Read episode number 31. And today I am joined by Vera and Tom Orange. Maybe I'll switch placements there because I have the names out of order there. All right. So we have Vera and Tom Orange. And Vera and I came on theme with the color that we're wearing. So Tom wouldn't feel alone with this color.
Yes.
And yes, so this is the Why Read series, and we always begin each episode with the same question, which is why read? And another way to ask this question is not necessarily an origin question, why you started reading. A lot of times, my friend Philip Chase, who has his Dear Dr. Fantasy live stream or discussion series, usually begins with that question. But my discussion series is a little more about what draws you to pick up a book, especially at a time when there are so many distractions and pastimes competing for your attention. And there's no right or wrong answer, by the way. So, Vera, let's start with you. Why read?
So I actually thought about this a lot because I wanted to give a good answer. And I have a few reasons. So for example, I really enjoy looking at art as a capsule of the time that it is created in. And my favorite form of art is literature. And so when like reading, it doesn't matter if I'm reading classics or if I'm reading current literature in any genre, I think that it always, there's some element of responding to the current psyche of the populace. And I really enjoy that because in some sort of fashion, that's the way that we can, that's the only way that we can communicate like word to word with people from our past. And like I think that's cool. And likewise, the books that are coming out today, people 100 years from now, that's their form of communicating with us. And so I think that's really cool. And so why wouldn't you read? You know, and so that's one reason. Another reason is I think the thing that sets apart books from, or short stories, novellas, things like that, from other forms of art is the written word. And I'm kind of throwing poetry into this as well, because I think that being able to distill some universal truth or some thought process or whatever it is into words and doing it succinctly or doing it in, I don't know, a way that just moves you is so powerful. And I think it takes a lot of skill. And yeah, I don't think you can get that, you know, the distilling of reality into words anywhere else. So I think that's pretty cool.
That's beautifully said. I love that. And I love what you said too about communicating with the past and getting like a general idea of the past as well. Because something that I really appreciate about your channel too, Vera, is that it seems like you really, when you go into your topic videos, which I would say that the majority of your videos are topic videos, you tend to try to expand out and get this broad scope of opinions, ideas, philosophies, and just hone that all in. And so I think that makes sense to me that you would want to do that through literature as well. See that as a time portal, if you will.
Yeah. What about you, Tom?
Yeah, that was a much more elegant answer than what I will say. My real answer is it is my favorite form of entertainment when it comes to like movies, TV, anime, any of those theater, any of those mediums. Reading is the one that I feel like I get the most out of entertainment wise, emotion wise, and yeah, it's just the one that has always kept me coming back. Outside of football, I don't really have like a huge desire to like watch TV or anything. But even when I was on vacation and I didn't have the opportunity to read for 2 weeks, the only thing I was thinking about was getting back and reading. And so it just gives me the whole gambit of emotions that I'm looking for that I don't get elsewhere most of the time. And so, yeah, it's just that level of an enjoyment that I get. So, yeah,
Yeah. By the way, you're
that is
getting a
why.
lot of love in the chat. I just want to point that out about your
Uh,
mustache
oh,
and
thank you.
among other things. So
Thanks,
that's
Jenny.
yeah, I mean, I think a lot of us can relate to that. A lot of us who become passionate about literature, it's becomes something that we get something out of it that we don't get out of any other media. So it just everything else it's not that you can't enjoy sports or other types of media, but there's something special about literature that you can't fulfill
Yeah.
through anything else. And I'm curious about that too, because I know that you had said to me in a comment at one point that I know that you have friends who ride motorcycles, who like to do adventurous things together, go on trips.
Yes.
But you said that not a lot of your friends were into reading. Is that true?
That is, yeah, 100%. So a lot of my hobbies outside of this, there's not much of an overlap between people who read and do those things. So like, I have a lot of gym bro friends, who are very into like competitive powerlifting, competitive strongman, those kind of things, bodybuilding. And then yes, I have a lot of friends who are significantly older than I am, but they're all motorcycle guys, motorcycle rallies, like that kind of stuff. And so they don't read. I couldn't tell you the last time a lot of those guys read a book or had even a desire to read a book. Like they left all of that in high school, whenever that was for them. And the last time they read a book was because somebody made them. And so I'm out on an island a little bit with a lot of the people I'm friends with. Not all of them. I do have some friends who read, but for the most part, yeah, it's me and myself.
What do they think about you having a channel dedicated to talking about books?
They think it's kind of silly. Not in like a mean way, but like they just don't. It doesn't make sense to them. In the same way, for a lot of people, like probably don't understand the appeal of watching somebody else play a video game. They don't understand why somebody would want to like watch videos about books.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they don't mean anything in like a harmful, mean way. Like they're
Yeah.
supportive and everything, but they definitely are like just right over their head. Do not get it at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to read this wonderful comment here. Storytelling is one of the pinnacles of human society, and books portray that in a very personal way. The author's style is the navigator on the boat of emotion and discussion. What a beautiful
Wow. That
way of
is
describing
wow.
Can I
that.
jump in on this?
Yes, please do.
Because I just want to shout out Cal because he is like an S tier commenter. He is so funny and and he always like writes like a paragraph that totally shifts my perspective on something. And sometimes I'm like, wow, I should have included that in the video. so
That's awesome.
so I'm so happy that Cal you could make it. Glad to see you here. Yeah.
Yes, thank you so much, Cal. What about you, Vera? Because I understand you're a med student, right?
Yeah, I have my favorite book actually. My favorite book, the one that I've been reading for the past 2 years over here. It's my favorite.
Oh,
I
wow.
don't recommend. No, you know how in the mid-year book freakout tag, there's the question like, which book made you cry?
Yeah.
But probably not in the ideal way of
Yeah.
crying.
Of happiness, obviously.
Yeah.
No, so my friends, they were forced to be fans. So I'm a huge believer in what Richard from Two to Ramble says, that democracy is cringe. And when I started my channel, I took that to the extreme because I was going around the cafeteria and I was like, subscribe, show me your phone, take it out, do it. And so they didn't have a choice. So I was actually motivated by the one and only Joe Abercrombie to start, not in real life, I wish, but I was reading First Law end of December, start of January, and there's this one character whose name is Logan Ninefingers, and he says, it's better to, once you've got a task that needs doing, it's better to do it than to live with the fear of it. And I realized that that's exactly what I was doing, that I was just living with the fear of it because I was like, yeah, oh my gosh, my friends will judge me, or I don't know, it would be looked on as something stupid. And I came to the conclusion, yeah, whatever, but I want to do it. So I'm doing it. And then a bunch of, I'm in this one group chat of girly pups, me and three other of my girlfriends. And we were really on the New Year's resolutions hype train. And we were like, this is the time, guys. And so one of them was motivated to, we were motivating her to pursue her like singing career a bit more. And I was being motivated to bite the bullet and start the channel. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. I love
That's
that you all
awesome.
supported each other, but it was like different. There were different goals.
Yeah. And so, and it's been going great for all of us. So, yeah.
Well, we're so glad you started your channel, and it seemed like that was something I also wanted to ask you about a little bit because I know that in your I think it was your 8K subscriber,
Oh, the
Q&A video
5K.
or
Yeah.
the 5K, and then you shot up even further, like another 1,000 by the time you posted the video.
Yeah,
Um,
I was at like 7K. I hit 7K the day I posted that
well,
video.
first of all,
Yeah,
congratulations
that's
on
awesome.
congratulations on that
Thank
significant
you.
channel growth, and I think it's very well deserved, very well earned, and,
Thank you.
I
Thank
was
you.
I was fascinated by some of the things you said about your strategy, because you had a strategy when you came
Yeah.
into starting your channel, and I feel like
Yeah.
you really took this channel into the perspective of the viewer and what you thought people who don't know me, what kind of content would draw them to click on my channel. That was how I interpreted you explaining that, that
Definitely.
you didn't feel like wrap-ups or things about me were gonna necessarily draw in an audience if they don't know, they weren't
Hmm.
gonna automatically want to know about you. They might wanna know about a topic. And so maybe starting your channel focused on specific topics that you found interesting, like meeting your audience in the middle. Topics that you
Yeah.
found interesting and that maybe a wider audience would find interesting, and then over time build that connection so that then they cared about, what you had to say about specific, book topics. Is that accurate? Did I
Yeah,
paraphrase that right?
I'd say that's very accurate. And I think what you said about me coming from the perspective of a viewer is very accurate because, like, I've been watching you guys for so long. Like, to put this in perspective, okay, I was a lurker, so you'd never know because I never commented or anything. But I Daniel Green recently released like a video reacting to one of his first fantasy news where he like he like privated it because he was kind of ashamed of it, and he said that he only wants it to exist in the context of him reacting to it and saying that it's bad. But I was watching that reaction and I was like, whoa, one of his first fantasy news, this will be so interesting. And then he's reacting to this video and I'm like, wait a second.
You
I
remembered it.
remember this video. And so, like, for example, Mike, I we started reading The Wheel of Time around the same time, and he was one book ahead of me. And so, like, I found him when he was, and in one of like those early videos, he's like, "Yeah, guys, I'm about to hit like 1,000 subscribers," and I'm like, "What?" you know? So it's so crazy to me. And I just wanted to get involved and meet people, and yeah, so that was my goal. But yeah, Tom, how about you? Like, what was your mindset when starting the channel?
Yeah, so some of it definitely came from not having that many people to talk to books about. So it was kind of like I needed to spew something into the void somewhere. And so if I was going to do that, I thought, why not at least try? Because like you, I did watch. I watched a lot of BookTube. I was a lurker too, so like it's not like I was commenting and all that kind of stuff. Which in retrospect, I kind of wish I would have, because being on this side of it, I like it's so nice to like get that interaction and get to talk to people. But yeah, I had watched a lot of BookTube beforehand, and I was like, I'm reading all of these books anyway, and I just wanted to talk about them, and so that's kind of how. And I think part of it was that I didn't have a lot of people to talk to about them because they don't they don't read. So yeah, that
Yeah.
was definitely a part of it.
I wanna say shout out to all the lurkers because I was a lurker too for a couple of years before I started a channel as well,
Yeah.
and I think starting to comment on videos was what drew me to start a channel because I realized, "Oh, wow, these people really care about wanting to interact and discuss things," and I think that's part of it. I mean, there's a little more to my story than that, but I would say that the welcoming part of the community was a huge factor. And yeah, I was surprised about that, Vera, because the first video I saw of yours was that you read the hardest fantasy book, which was Gardens of the Moon. And I saw
Yes.
it come up in my feed, and I thought, "Oh," and I got excited because I thought, "Female Malazan reader, I'm always gonna click on that." And, sure enough, I loved your video and I commented, and then you said, "Oh, I've been watching you." I'm like, "What?" That
Yeah,
was
I was
kind
so
of surreal.
starstruck. I was like,
I was
"Whoa,
like,
she knows I exist." That's so crazy. Because before I started Malazan, I think you have a talk with Dr. Philip Chase and someone else. Was it Dr. AP Canavan. I'm not sure, but you have a talk with someone, like an intro to Malazan or something like that. And I watched that literally like right before starting the book. And while I was making my way through Gardens of the Moon, I was so lost. I was watching every AP Canavan video. I was watching um, uh, Dr. Philip Chase's spoiler-free reviews, and I was watching everything. And so I was like, whoa, these people that have spent hours, like hours watching, like they know I exist. Like,
Yeah.
that's so crazy.
Yeah.
You know
I'm
what I
so
mean?
glad. Yeah, I'm just so excited. And I'm excited about your journey as well, Tom. I know that you just recently finished Memories of Ice, and I watched your
Yes.
blog about that. And yeah, I mean, I think it's always fun to see a fresh perspective on the series. And I mean, like when I came into talking or having my channel, I was already 3 books in, but there weren't a lot there wasn't a ton of Malazan content at that time, especially when I started the series. So it is always nice to have fresh perspectives on that. Um, how's that been for you, Tom?
Yeah, I have had an interesting time with the series so far. So I really had a good time with Gardens of the Moon. I really liked that book, and so I was like super excited to get into Dead House Gates. And I don't know if that book just I read it maybe at not the best time, if I was distracted or what, but I had a much more difficult time when I was reading Dead House Gates. The whole like 60% of that middle book, so like from like 20% to 80%, I I was like, this is so boring. I just didn't get it. I This was not connected with it at all. And then by the end, I came back around. Like the ending of what happens there at that book is just incredible. Something I'll never forget. And so that kind of like saved the series for me because if it had ended where I was, I, it would have been hard for me, even though I already owned book 3 to like push on and read that. And then Memories of Ice was I had a really good time with that. My favorite of the series. It did take me a lot longer to read it than I would have liked to, but I think that's fine with a series like that. Like I took my time and just kind of made my way through it as I went. And so I really enjoyed Memories of Ice, and there are definitely some like big moments in that one that are just like awesome.
Oh, it's
And
so
so
incredible.
yeah.
I want to go ahead and mention here because Philip was mentioning that the discussion might have been with Jimmy, and I did have the pleasure of getting to know Jimmy through Malazan, fortunately, and we did get to have some fantastic discussions on his channel uh, when he used to do booktube videos with people. So I just want to go ahead and mention that because that was really a special, special time for me personally. But I want to say too, Tom, and I want to also warn Vera about this too, because I know that have you started Dead House Gates yet, Vera?
No, one of my friends from Dublin, he he's getting the Broken Binding editions, and so he's probably going to send me his edition. So I'm
Oh,
waiting for
nice.
that. Yeah.
Very nice. Yes. I did order the Broken Binding editions. I won't lie.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll just go ahead and say like I had such a similar story, Tom. Like
Mm,
I started the series again before I started a channel, and I read book 1. I loved Gardens of the Moon. I mean, I might have loved it to a ridiculous amount more than most people.
okay.
But then when I read Dead House Gates, I didn't know anything about the series at the time. And so I don't know how I'm sure you probably are more well informed at this point, Vera, but I didn't know that we go to a different continent and have like a mostly whole new cast of characters. I mean, there are some that cross over and that we would do that like book to book. So I was I was a bit overwhelmed when I read Dead House Gates, and I don't know for some reason it just didn't quite work for me the same way that Gardens of the Moon did. I can't explain why. It is a very different change of pace. It's very different. But then, I mean, I love the ending of Dead House Gates, which is pretty fantastic. But I didn't know if I would continue the series after Dead House Gates. And what changed my mind at the time were 2 videos. One was from Books with Brittany, who interviewed Stephen Erickson. And I think, Vera, you said you saw that video.
I love that video. I became interested in Malazan because of that video.
Yes.
Yeah, I was listening to him speak, and I was like, I
Yes.
need more. And so
Yes.
yeah. Yeah,
It's
it
my
was such a good interview.
it's one of my favorite interviews, I think, author interviews I've seen on BookTube. It was so good, and Brittany, she nailed it. She held her
Yeah,
own. She was amazing in that interview, and yeah, I was just so impressed with everything he had to say that it completely shifted the way I thought about the series. And then secondly, the other video was a channel who is not as frequent on BookTube anymore, but he sometimes makes videos, and that is Andy Smith. Andy Smith is amazing. Love Andy's channel, love Andy. And he did an amazing video on Malazan and postmodernism. And he explains how Malazan is a postmodern critique of the fantasy genre. And I cannot recommend that video enough. Steven Erickson actually commented on that video. It's pinned in the comment section. It's a phenomenal video. But that particular video was the video that made me think, oh, that's why I struggled with Dead House Gates. And it brought a whole new, it just changed the whole way that I approached the series, completely changed the way that I read Malazan. And yeah, the way I related to the series. So
that
always
sounds like a
recommend.
video that I would absolutely love. So I'm gonna check it out. But I do have a question for Tom.
Okay.
Tom, how did, because I didn't watch your thoughts on Dead House Gates or Memories of Ice because I don't want to like accidentally get spoiled because
Yes,
that
yeah.
happened to me.
Ooh.
Not gonna name names here, but um, so I was curious, how did you find the reorientation, like the switch of the characters? And I heard that Memories of Ice goes back to Jenna Bacchus, right? Is that the continent, right? So
Yeah.
how was that for you?
So I think it was easier because I knew it was coming. Just like
Mm,
I had seen enough content on Malazan to know that there was this kind of switching. And I actually somebody I do know who reads in actually I've never met him in real life either, but I've known him. I know him outside of BookTube. He is a huge Malazan fan. Like he has read all of it, and when I mean all of it, I mean like Erickson, Esselmont, all of the short stories, all of the other, or he's very close to it. And so he has kind of been my shepherd a little bit. So when I told him I was getting ready to start Dead House Gates, he was kind of like, be ready for this. And so I kind of had a little bit of a cheat sheet there to help me like with those transitions. So it wasn't as jarring, I think, as like if you just went from book one to book two with no idea, like I could definitely see
mm.
you being like, what is going on? Just like you said, yeah, I could definitely see that.
And coming back to Memories of Ice, did it kind of feel like coming home, or is it once again?
Yeah, I think so there were, not to say there weren't characters that I ended up connecting with in Dead House Gates, but it did feel like coming back to where I wanted to be in Memories of Ice a
Mm,
little bit more. I There's a couple characters that are in those books, the first two a little bit more, that I just feel like I'm a little bit more connected with and like more. So coming back to Memories of Ice, I think that maybe gave it the leg up to like it more as I read through
yeah.
it. So yeah, definitely.
Something that AP Canavan said, or Dr. Professor AP Canavan said in one of his videos that I thought was very interesting was he said that, maybe it was in the spoiler-free section of the Dead House Gates review that he did with Dr. Philip Chase, but he said that Dead House, that if we think of like the books following the character of the Empire, then it makes sense that Dead House Gates is in like the other part of the map where the revolution is growing, or like revolts are growing, something like that, because we hear about like unrest in the Empire in book one, and book one is kind of like these different forces either trying to sustain the Empire or kind of undermine it, you know what I mean? And so since that's book one, it makes sense that then we hear about the brewing conflict and then we follow that brewing conflict in book two, and then in
Yeah.
book three there's this thing that's foreshadowed in like the poems in Gardens of the Moon, and so it makes sense that then we go back there. Does that make sense? And so
Yes,
he
it
said it
does.
way better. Like I'm
No,
butchering his words
there
right now, but when
from
he
what I
said
can
that I
tell,
was like, yes.
yeah, from what I could tell, if you actually understand everything that's going on in these books, which I'm not sure I'll ever be able to do, I think it is like a masterpiece, probably laid like hand laid brick by brick, built up beautifully. Like I doubt there's like mistakes in there. Whether or not you're going to catch everything, it's like looking at a super detailed picture or painting. Like somebody's going to look at it and some things are going to stand out compared to somebody else looking at the same thing and other things are going to stand out. and to actually see everything in the picture is going to be crazy. And there's only a few people who can probably do that, and I'm not one of them. So that doesn't surprise me that
Well,
somebody like AP gets it.
something that AP said in one of his talks too is that no one is going to get everything in Malazan. He said he still doesn't get everything in Malazan. He was the advanced reader for part of the series. And one of the reasons you won't get everything from Malazan is that some of the things are inside jokes between Esselmont and Erickson, the
Well, there you
creators of the
go.
Malazan series.
Yeah,
That's not really how they wrote it. They didn't write it so that every single end is going to come to a conclusion, though I understand a lot of storylines are concluded or developed further in Esselmont's books. But yeah, I think it's important to know that. And I always tell people, and I'm sorry, I hope it was okay saying this in your video, Tom, but I always tell people, like, do not feel pressured. I do this
oh
out
yeah,
of the bottom of my heart. Like,
yeah.
if you're doing Malazan content, never feel pressured to feel like you have to talk about everything that happens in a book because there's so much, and nobody
There's no
does.
way.
And nobody does. I mean,
Yeah,
Philip and AP have incredible discussions on those books. They don't talk about everything that happens in those books.
yeah,
There's
yeah.
no way to do it. We had wonderful long form discussions on Jimmy's channel on several of the books. We didn't talk about every single little thing.
Of
I
course,
think
yeah,
it's more just about, you said, Tom, you're a moments person in your blog. And I'm like, that's what it is.
yeah,
Focus on the moments that are meaningful to you or that intrigue you or excite you or whatever that you're curious about. Talk about those.
yep.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
exactly. I've seen examples of that all just in the comments of that video. I won't spoil anything, but I talked about one specific thing that happened a lot, and somebody was like, "Oh, I wish you had talked about this," and it's like the thing they were talking about just didn't have that impact on me, and so I think it's just like a perfect example of like there's so much going on that you're gonna find stuff for yourself as an individual of like what you were really drawn to and everything.
100%. There are
Yeah,
things in the series that didn't impact me as deeply
yeah,
as some people, and some things that did, and some things
yeah.
maybe more so. Mike from Mike's Book Review says Erickson and I were going to chat when I finished the series. Oops.
One
Uh,
day.
Case in point here, I know that Mike is reading, or he's stuck on Toll the Hounds, as he was saying on Theo's channel earlier. And that was a book that some people say that's the cipher of the series, and that's the best book in the series. And for me, I have very mixed feelings about that particular book for my own reasons. But I
Yeah,
mean, I still think it's a great book. But different people are just going to resonate with the series in different ways. So
yeah,
it's just the way it
The
is.
thing that I'm most excited for and is really pushing me forward is so if you don't know me, I love Joe Abercrombie.
Let's talk about that.
That's all. Like my goal with this channel is to get a Devil's Arc. If you know Joe Abercrombie, please. Anyway, in I think Dr. Philip Chase's video with Steve and Erickson, he mentioned that Joe Abercrombie is Tuckerized in one of the books. And Tuckerization is when you like put a real life person into the story, or like something like that. I'm not too sure, but he said that he has a Joe Abercrombie kind of like inspired character by the author, and I was like, oh my gosh, I need to read. I need to know. And I also really want to know, because in your favorite female fantasy characters, you said that you loved Tavor. And
Yeah.
I was like, ooh, interesting. I want to know why you like her. So
Yeah, I think I hope you'll like her. It's hard to say without spoilers, but yeah, I did. I felt like, well, I can say without spoilers that I think part of it for me is that she's constantly, she's one of the few characters I think that is prominent in the series that doesn't get a perspective. Now, one of my friends, Jake Bishop, said I'm wrong about that we do get passages from her perspective. I don't remember. I guess I just blanked out on those passages, but for the most part, I felt like most of the perspectives were other characters questioning her, trying to understand her, and I found that very effective for me, and I just found myself drawn to this character. If you read on, maybe we could talk about it. I can't wait to talk
yeah,
with you when you
definitely,
finish. Yeah,
definitely.
yeah. But I love Joe Abercrombie too. I hope you get that Devil's Arc. I can't wait to read that as well. Also want to highlight Cal's comment here. I feel like Malazan is something you have to take slow. It's way too complex for binge reading. At least I feel that that's what it would be like for me. Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot to take in, especially if are you two the type of people? It seems like I understand, Tom, you're doing Wars of Light and Shadow and Lazen. Is that
Yeah.
so? Talk to me about that. Do you guys like to do multiple series at once, or is this something that's maybe a new development since starting channels? Yeah.
So for me, I've always kind of jumped around when it comes to series. Like I think I was reading The Expanse and Wheel of Time at the same time. So I mean, different genres, but and not not as complex as as Malazan and Wars of Light and Shadow. But I've always kind of done that. Yeah, gone back and forth between different series. I normally don't read like the same series back to back to back. I normally try to break it up with some other stuff in between. The only exception for that is actually probably Wheel of Time. When I got to like the last 4 books or so, I was like, okay, I love the Wheel of Time. So like I just was like, okay, I can't not just read this. So I kind of powered through the Wheel of Time there at the end. But yeah, for the most part, I jump around, and I don't know. It's something I've always done actually. So
Oh, okay.
Do you have a
Yeah.
way of, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Do you have a way of keeping track, like which series you are in the middle of and which you do want to continue, which you're prioritizing, or not really?
I think I actually made a video on that one time, and I counted all of the series that I was like in the middle of, and it was like 30 something. And
Oh,
so
wow.
I thought I did a good job until I did that, and I don't think I actually do the best job of like continuing with series all the time, unless they're like ones that I'm like really really into. There's a lot that I like. I think they're fine and they're good, and I'll continue at some point, but I don't have like that push, which sometimes does lead me to like having to find spoiler discussions on a book that I have read because it'll have been a year or two, and I don't really reread books. So like going back and then rereading something to read a new book is just not something I do. I don't, maybe that's my one of my reading flaws, that I don't have the patience to go back and reread something. But if I can find like a Wikipedia page or a video, I'll do that and then go back to the series. That's kind of like my happy point. Do you keep
Yeah,
track of your
I
stuff
do
like
a
that?
similar thing.
Okay, yeah.
I, for me, it's Mike, because I feel like Mike always in his spoiler discussions really talks about like such a huge breadth of topics that it slowly comes back to me. And
Mhm.
especially, so you talked about Wheel of Time, and I did something very similar. As I said like a few minutes ago, I was at the start right behind Mike, and I think we started our break with the series around the same time, but mine lasted way longer
Okay.
because of Winter's Heart. I hate that
That
book. Sorry,
yeah.
I hate that book. I like Wheel of Time. I hate Winter's Heart. Okay, just don't come for me. I'm sorry. I'm
I haven't
sorry.
read Wheel of
Okay.
Time, so I can't
Oh,
come at you.
I
I'm
love
sorry,
Wheel of Time.
but it really took me so long. I had 3 attempts with that book, and last September, October, maybe October, I was like, okay, I need to finish the series because I don't want to be one of those people that stops reading it during the slog.
Mhm.
And so I just binged all of Mike's reviews again,
Okay,
and I was like, okay,
we're
this is
ready.
coming back. So
Okay. Did you think Winter's Heart was worse than Crossroads of Twilight?
yes.
Okay. See, I think Crossroads is probably my least favorite of them all.
Okay,
But
why do you say that?
I'd have to go and remember, because I rank all of the books I read. So I know
Mhm.
Crossroads of Twilight is my least favorite one, but I would actually have to go back and remember exactly, because to me it all blends together at this point. It's just like
Mhm.
one long book. So I'd have to go back and remember. I think if I remember correctly, something really big happens at the end of Winter's Heart, right? I don't know if you
Mhm.
remember. And I
Yeah.
think that is probably what puts it above Crossroads of Twilight for me. I think that's probably what it is, if I'm remembering the big event at the end of Winter's Heart. And that's probably the only reason.
So, in my opinion, uh, just because the book has one good chapter doesn't the rest of the book still sucks. For me, every single page of Winter's Heart, I wanted to claw my eyes out. I wanted to claw my
Okay.
eyes out. Like and the fact that I read half of it like 3 times just because I kept forgetting what was going on, and I was like, but here we go again.
Yeah.
I hated that book. And then in the end, also the villains really annoyed me because they were so useless, and
Yeah.
Jordan kept building them up, and they were just just
That
do
is,
something.
yeah,
You know
that,
what I mean? Just do
yeah,
something.
absolutely. That's
And
probably the
then,
biggest flaw with Wheel of Time is some of the Forsaken era are
yeah, the
just,
Forsaken. Oh my God,
yes,
they're
yeah,
so useless. If all like villainous lackeys were like that, no
yes,
problem.
yeah,
But then Crossroads of Twilight, because I knew that it was looked down upon, but I also knew that it was just gonna be. This isn't a spoiler. Well, I don't think it's a spoiler. Can I say like what the structure of the book is? Just
Yeah, I
I
think the
won't say what
structure
it
go
is
is.
for it.
spoiler free.
Okay, so
It'll be
the
fine.
structure of the book is that we follow the characters that we didn't follow in Winter's Heart, and we basically follow what they were doing at the time of Winter's Heart up until that final chapter where that crazy thing happens. And then once that happens, we switch to a different perspective and we do the same thing. And we do that like 6 times or something. And
Hmm.
so because I kind of by the second time I was like, okay, here we go again, reset, let's go.
Yes.
Rewind. It's rewind time, as Will Smith said back in the day. Sorry. But I was kind of like, you know what, it's okay. I learned to live with the characters in that beautiful cycle of reliving the same
Same
event.
thing over and
So
over again. Yeah.
yeah.
So you obviously think the slog is pretty real.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. See, I think so personally. I think people overblow it. I've seen some
Oh,
people that say like the slog starts at like book 5 and goes all the way, or book 6 and goes all the way to like whenever Sanderson takes over. And to me, I think it's really just those 2 books, which is
Yeah,
probably
I think
another.
book
That's
5 is
probably the
great.
unpopular opinion on the other side of the spectrum, where I'm not as tough on it. But yeah, I know it definitely is there. I know some people will even argue it's not, but it is. It's there a little
so
bit.
I'll admit, I just don't have the desire at this point in my life. I always say never, but I have no motivation to read Wheel of Time right now.
Yeah,
And I think part of it is because it's such a long series, and to hear that there are multiple books considered the slog. Now, I am somebody that tends to enjoy what I would consider slow burn books. Like I liked Farseer, for example. A lot of people would consider that pretty slow burn.
hmm,
But the way that I hear about Wheel of Time is not only that there are multiple books that are called a slog, which I would love somebody, maybe you two can explain. Can you explain in a spoiler-free way why it's a slog? I don't know if anybody can without spoilers. Like where are we focusing our attention? Is it just that there's not because different people I think mean different things when it comes to pacing. I had a wonderful discussion here on my channel about that.
hmm,
But I think that a lot of times when we say slow burn, it's maybe because we're focusing on a character and their day-to-day life, or maybe there's not a lot of action scenes. So I guess one would question what slog means. I won't lie though, when I hear that, it's not a motivator.
of
And
course,
secondly,
yeah,
the other thing too is I've heard that there are some kind of cringy things with magic and gender that are explored that maybe were kind of neat for the time, but maybe didn't age well.
hmm.
But I don't really know details because I haven't read the series. So.
Tom, do you want to take that first?
Yeah. So for the slog part, for me, I think a lot of people call it the slog because there are so many plot points that are happening, but they all kind of come to a stop at the same time, and there's so many things going on that none of them are really making any progress. And so you're kind of dealing with the same thing over and over again with very little progress actually happening. I think that's probably why most people would point to that being the slog. I will also say, just in general, I think it's possible that Robert Jordan's writing style just doesn't work for a lot of people. It is extremely repetitive,
That's
and
probably it.
yeah, it's extremely repetitive. So you're getting extremely repetitive writing on top of extremely repetitive plot points for 2, 3 books at a time, which I think for some people is very hard. I will say, I didn't give any Wheel of Time book lower than a 4 star. Like I really liked all of them, even the ones that were bad. I still really liked. So like I know it's crazy. Some people like that's blowing people's mind right now. I like the Wheel of Time is like my fantasy series. So like I get it.
Wow.
I know I'm kind of way up there for that. And as far as the cringy stuff, I think there's definitely some like cringy stuff. I don't remember the magic itself. Now there is like um, a magic system that is split based on the genders. I actually found that to be really interesting because of this is explained very early on in the series, but men in the series can't use the magic without going insane. And so it kind of sets up a matriarchal system of where the women are really the ones with the power. And I thought that was at the time, maybe if I went back and reread it now after reading more, I wouldn't find it as interesting. But I found it interesting to give women in the series this immense power that, you know, is above and beyond everything else anybody can do. Now there is definitely some cringy stuff in that series, though. There absolutely there is. So
Like
yeah,
weird love triangle stuff? I think I've heard that too.
yes, there is absolutely a very weird love triangle thing in there. That is, I don't know what the reasoning for it. I mean, there is reasoning in the series of why it's supposed to work and stuff. I'm not saying it does, but
Yeah.
there's a reason. It is a little strange, and I can definitely see why people would refer to it as being very cringy. There's
Are
actually a
you
scene.
talking? Sorry, are you,
No, no,
because I'm not sure which one you mean. Are you talking about the one during the slog?
no. That I'm talking about the one with the main character. With
What? Okay, okay.
Rand, is
with
that?
Rand. Yeah, with
Yeah.
Rand
Yeah, okay. Okay.
and yeah, those people. But yeah, so in general, there's a scene I'm specifically thinking of that is probably
Yes.
one of the cringiest things I have ever read. And I don't want to say what it is because it is like a massive spoiler for late in the series, but it is one of the cringiest things I've ever read. And I bet you know what I'm talking
Do you
about.
know which book it is in?
I don't remember which book it's in, but
Driving her crazy, not knowing. Her brain
I
It's
too.
in
can message.
Winter's Heart.
I can message you later and
Yeah,
tell
you
you
can
what
put it in the
what it is, though.
private chat too if you want to. I don't really care.
Okay.
But yeah, it's funny, but it's just such a polarizing series. So, like for example, here Caitlin is saying the Sog doesn't exist. Jaron says here the Sog started in book one.
Oh gosh.
And then different people just have very different takes on Wheel of Time. Some people love it and are die hard about it. You're not alone, Tom. You're not alone in
Yes.
your
No,
love of
I
the
I
series.
love it
yeah.
too.
Yeah, and it
Yeah,
sounds
no,
like you
that
love it too, Vera. I don't doubt your love of the series too, even though you had some challenges with it along the way, and I think that's okay. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, for me, about the magic system, I don't know. I think, like, I heard that criticism as well, but I think at some point people just need like it's, I don't know. I don't see it at all because the point of the series, like one of the big themes, is that men and women have to get along. You know, and so the magic system is built to create conflict with that because, as Tom said, it's very early on established that women have all the power, because the second a man starts showing signs of he can do the magic, like people know, oh, this is a ticking time bomb, he's going to go crazy and kill everyone. So obviously a bunch of the women are like, yeah, we find a guy like that. You know what I mean? Like, it's logical. However, that creates a lot of distrust. And obviously, like, it's not, that's, having the, men and women like at war with each other the entire time is also like not good. So a big theme in the series is how do we overcome these challenges and work together? So, like, if people say, oh, it's problematic, well, yeah, but like Robert Jordan is saying this like because he's saying we need to unite and understand each other and work together, and I think it's very beautiful. About the love triangle, I know exactly the scene that you're referencing, Tom, and I'm
Okay.
like 90% sure that it's in Winter's Heart. So once again,
Okay.
more evidence for that being a terrible book. Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love other books in this series, but I hate Winter's Heart. Um,
Yeah.
and the slog, I agree with pretty much everything you said, but for me, it was books 8, 9, and 10.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's part of the problem with Wheel of Time is that's like the traditional most people agree that those are the three, right? And as more and more people I think have read the series and have talked about it, the slog has like increased in size and people have expanded upon what they consider the slog. So, but like 8, 9, and 10 are like totally the ones that everyone's like, those are
Yeah.
the ones. Yeah.
I always
think-
wonder about that. I wonder if like pacing expectations and fantasy have changed too. So anyway.
Well, I think the other books don't have a problem. Like, I think book 2 is perfectly paced. I think book 5 is amazingly paced. I think book 11, Jordan's last book, I think he really managed to tie up all the main plots of the slog and
Yeah.
just really give them such a great conclusion. Like I teared up at the end of that book because I was like, "Well, this is so beautiful," and I'm so happy that he had the opportunity to and the health to complete that.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's just the writing style. I think if you don't click with the writing style, you'll know that by the end of book one.
Yeah.
It just, I feel like all the problems get exacerbated in the slog. But something that Murphy mentioned, I think, in her series review was that, or maybe it's Daniel Green that said it. I don't remember. But that the 3 slog books are also like the shortest books.
Yeah.
So like some
They
books
are.
are 1,000 or more pages, and the slog books are like 500, 600, something
Yeah.
like that. So
They are the shortest.
like
Yeah.
it's okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I've heard some people say that those 3 books could have been all chopped down and have been one book, but you know, teach their
Yeah.
own, I guess.
I do think writing style does compensate a lot. It doesn't cover everything, as Vera was saying, but I do
Mhm.
think it compensates a lot because I think I've noticed that I tend to love books that a lot of people consider slow burn or slower, but a lot of times it's because the writing is so good, in my opinion. Like I love the writing style. If I
Mhm.
love the writing style, then I can usually tolerate that quite a bit more. Maybe it'll draw me into either the details of the world or what the character is experiencing. But at the same time, like that can only go so far if you're constantly being repetitive, or if you're stuck in an area that, I guess it just that could be a little bit subjective, is how I mean, all of it's subjective, right? I have my
Sure.
friend here in the chat who has made a whole video about how everything is subjective in art, habitual blood. But yeah, it's something that comes to mind, though. I do think that the more that a writer hones in their craft, I think that the more able they might be able to pull off the slow burn effect.
Mhm.
But it really just depends, though. Like, I know for me, I'm trying to think of an example. I just talked in my video yesterday about a book called Vita Nostra.
Mhm.
It's like a
Yes.
magical realism. Have you read that? Dark
No, but
Academia?
I just made a comment, like, because while I was getting ready, I was watching that video, and I really want to read it. So seeing it get an endorsement from you will
Oh,
make
I'd
me very
love to hear.
excited.
I think there might be a chance you'd like it. It's weird. It's magical realism weirdness, but I really enjoyed the writing and I really felt drawn into the psychological journey of the character. And I had a wonderful discussion with my friend. She has a channel, Alicia Guzman, and when we talked about the book, I didn't even consider it slow burn because I was so fascinated by every detail in the story. And she said, "Oh yeah, it's a slow burn book." I'm like, "Oh, that
Hmm.
just shows you how off my gauge is when it comes to determining if a book is slow burn or not."
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. So,
Yeah, I'm
I
always curious on how much we're influenced on some of that stuff, just from like being in this sphere too. Like when you hear everyone talking about like the slog, just because we were talking about it, do you like how influenced have people been going into these books, knowing they're they're the worst? I'm always curious. I don't know. Do you guys find that where you'll hear an opinion about a book and then you kind of go into it and have that like lens when you go into it, whether it
Maybe
be
Three Body
positive or
Problem.
negative? Okay.
Maybe Three Body Problem, because I know that you love Death's End,
Yes,
um,
I do.
and I don't know. I think for me, knowing the opinions about what the book really helps me set expectations. That does mean that sometimes I go into a book and I'm pretty sure that I will either like it or not like it. However, I try not to let that affect me, but I'm sure there's some confirmation bias there. But so I knew that people loved The Dark Forest, which is book 2 of that trilogy. And
Mhm.
so after finishing The Three Body Problem, and I was like, yeah, this was very interesting, but I don't know, the characters weren't like, they were more so just like stand-ins. But I knew that people said read book 2. And so I was like, okay. And I met my guy, Lou OG.
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
and great book. So.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure we are greatly influenced. I haven't read that trilogy yet. I know you 2 are big fans, right? Both of you are?
It's
But
my favorite. Yeah.
yeah, it's your favorite. So
Yeah.
I do need to get to it at some point. But that I have had my expectations put in place that it is not the most fleshed out. It doesn't have the most fleshed out characters. That the prose, and it is a translated work. That maybe
Yeah.
the prose is not quite as refined as other works, but that the ideas are really good, like really, really compelling, like very scary, is
Yes.
Oh
what
yeah.
I've heard. It sounds
Yeah.
terrifying from what I've heard. So I'm sure that's gonna, I mean, that, expectations are gonna affect our experiences. So I'm sure there's
Yeah.
some truth to that.
Yeah. I'm
I
always
had a
worried when I
pharmacology.
talk about
Sorry.
it. No, you go
Go
first.
ahead. I was just gonna say I had like a pathology exam right after I finished the Dark Forest, and I was having a mental breakdown walking into that exam, like, So sorry, yeah.
No,
Wow.
I was just gonna say I'm always worried when I talk about some of the series and books that I love because I'll speak so highly of them, and especially in a book in a series that I know is probably going to not resonate with a lot of people. Like the Remembrance of Earth's Past trilogy is not something that I would recommend to a lot of people. Yeah, I know it has wide acclaims and so many people enjoy it, but I just feel like I also know so many people that the way it's written and everything will not work. So I'm always nervous when I talk about a book like that because I don't want to like mislead people.
Oh, I feel this
Because
so much. Yes.
yes, yeah, I'm sure. Especially like just I do a lot of book reviews in general. So anytime I'm really positive about something, I always do try to like make my points of like you might not like it because of this and that, but if you like these you will. And I feel that so much with that series in general. Like that is one of the few series that I feel like everything about it was just like absolutely perfect and worked for me. And so I don't
Yeah.
know, I feel that a lot with it.
I think that specificity is really important when it comes to that.
Hmm.
Yeah, absolutely, because I feel that too. And I did a video kind of just like you, Tom. I did a video a long time ago, um, and it was on books I love that I don't recommend to everyone. I remember Piranesi was on the thumbnail for that,
Hmm.
and the reason I made the video at the time, because I know I've heard AP Canavan say multiple times in videos that the most asinine thing you could say is that a book is for everyone. Like, and I'm like, yes, I know. I feel like he was talking about my video, but anyway, the reason I made the video at the time was because I felt like at the time when I at that time in my booktube journey, I felt like if you loved a book and you talked about a book, that was automatically you as a creator saying, everybody should read that book. And I always felt mixed about that because there were so many books that I would love. And I'd automatically think, yeah, but my friend Alan would hate this book.
Hmm.
Or, yeah, but I don't think that this friend would like this book because of this, but I love that. And
Hmm.
so I always felt very conflicted because I didn't feel like I could just come on and just, "Hey, you're gonna all love this book,"
Yeah.
even though the idea is that if people are subscribed to you, they probably have similar reading tastes to you. I never want to assume that.
Hmm.
And I think that's kind of the beauty of having a reading community is that we can have diverse opinions about the same books,
Hmm.
and maybe we align about some books. Maybe we have the exact same feelings about some books, and then maybe we're the complete opposite. It's like just like you all were saying that you love Wheel of Time or had different feelings about the slog, and then there are people in the chat who are like, the slog doesn't exist. The slog started from book one. I
Yeah.
just think that adds, that adds richness to the discussion. That we're not all in an echo chamber. That we all have different perspectives. But yeah, I don't. So I
No,
think that that's something
absolutely.
that just speaks to my heart. The way you said, like wanting to be very specific about who the book would appeal to and why, who the book wouldn't appeal to and why. And sometimes, even if it's a book that's like a home run for us, that could be hard. But sometimes it's valuable to take just a little bit of distance from our perspective of the book and try
Hmm.
to think, okay, well, what about a wider audience? What kind of reader? And I don't think I'm always the most successful at doing it, but I'm trying to get better.
Same. Absolutely. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So I'm gonna go ahead and catch up here in the chat a little bit. Uh, so I love. Okay, and by the way, so here Indian Tide says the Dark Forest is the best, and also says that existential dread in that book is so good. So I was watching your video, Vera, about your response video to Library of a Viking and to Matt's fantasy book review.
I was hoping we'd
And
talk about this.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Oh,
I've actually
me
been
stirring
opened
the
up.
drama.
We've
No.
been having a huge I shared your video in my Discord and asked people
Oh,
what
thank
their
you.
thoughts, and yeah, and it just seems like a really hot topic right now. But one thing I want to say that I loved in that video, I mean, I love the video, but one thing you talked about being an existentialist.
I
And
love that. Yeah.
it's so funny because I feel like existentialism, if somebody tells me a book is existentialist, that's almost like a book buzzword for me these days. And I talked about that to my husband recently, and he said, "You used to hate that word." I'm like, "I did. I forgot about that about a few years ago, not too long ago. I used to hate the term existentialism because I always used to interpret it as these emo ex-boyfriends I had when I was younger saying, I don't I'm an existentialist, and, like, it was a way of trying to say, "I don't feel anything," like, I always had a
Mm.
negative association with that word when I was younger, and now I think I just love it. I love that concept that, we are creatures that seek meaning in the world, and we create that meaning, and we can find that through creating it for ourselves or there's something beautiful and poetic about it in my mind. So yeah, I just wanted to highlight that. But if you want to expand on
Yeah,
that
no,
video.
thank you so much. I'm so happy with the response to that because I didn't want to. I feel like the thumbnail was quite inflammatory, but I didn't want to be like, but actually, shout out to Johan, who is so lovely because I messaged like the four main people that I was responding to in the video, and I was like, by the way, you probably don't know who I am, but if you see this video, like I'm trying to be respectful, blah blah blah, heads up. And Johan, and I feel like I disagreed with him on like a few things here and there, and I was like, yeah, hi, I'm gonna put out this video tomorrow. And he's like, oh really, have you thought of a thumbnail? And I was like, yeah, I was workshopping it right now, and I sent him like two options, and he was like, yeah, this one's better. Actually change the text to both are wrong because then that will make more people click on it. And actually, let me just send you this link so that you can like test out what your title will look like in the different like ways that it like crops it, like YouTube crops the title. Oh, and then you can see how the title and the thumbnail work together. Oh, and actually, if you use this as your title, and I was like, sir, I just messaged you to tell you that I'll be disagreeing with you, and you're helping. Like, I was like, Johan, it was so kind, and like I said this to him. Hopefully, I didn't come off as like a crazy fan, but people say don't meet your heroes, but like Johan, I love his editing and the way every single one of his videos is a story in and of itself. I think that's so good. Just by watching his videos, I feel like I learn a lot. And the fact that like I just messaged him and he started giving me such good feedback, and I mean, it was
That's
so
awesome.
kind. So yeah, I just wanted to say thank you, Johan. But yeah, about the existentialism, sorry, I'm rambling. This is why I cut my videos so much. But when it comes to the existentialism, some people really look at it as like this doomsday philosophy because nothing makes like nothing has meaning, everything is absurd, blah blah blah. But like, yeah, I find comfort in that, because at the end of the day, that means that only the things that I genuinely put value in mean anything. And like an example that you can think of, it was in one of the videos I watched when I was refreshing my memory, is if I tell someone, okay, I'm going to go have dinner with a friend, that sounds normal to us because we're used to that. But if you think about it, like what it actually means, it means that you're gonna, once this earth has turned enough away from the sun, you will go meet with another animal to sit on dead trees, eating other cut up animals and other dead plants just because you want to make sounds at each other. Like, that's so absurd, but because we give this interaction the meaning dinner with friend, it has been, yeah, sorry. So I think it's very interesting and comforting.
No, I think it's comforting too, and I loved how you were relating that to your channel. You were kind of talking about how you bring your focus into what's meaningful for you. Is that right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
did that.
exactly. So like for me, you know, I'd love to have, you know, more books or stuff, but that's not something that is as important. Like, if I don't know, I feel like if I have something interesting to say and the production quality is good enough of the video, in the video, then, and I can market it to the correct group of people, what I have in the background doesn't matter as much, you know. And also, I just moved back to Ireland 2 weeks ago. I can't bring a bookshelf of things here. I can't. You know, in Poland, like I have a bookshelf, I have my books, I have my Witcher books there. Here I have a few Cormac McCarthy's because I want to make a Cormac McCarthy video, and like I have Pure Nessie, but like that's pretty much it, you know. And like, okay, like I shouldn't feel bad that I can't bring that bookshelf with me, because first of all, I'm just a girl, like I can't carry that. Second of all, shipping costs a lot. Third of all, like whatever, you know.
Well, I
So
find your background even now like very refreshing. There's something about that. And it actually kind of gave me confidence today because I just got this new bookshelf behind me
mm,
and it's so empty. And I thought, is that going to look really bad to have an empty bookshelf behind me? I thought, you know what? It doesn't matter. Like, who cares?
Yeah.
People can
yeah,
judge me, whatever. I don't care. I'm not in a rush to fill it, by the way. It'll be filled when it's filled. So I don't know, like something about that message spoke to me and I thought, yeah, yeah, I like that. I like the idea of just, you know, um, not putting so much pressure on yourself about those things. Um,
yeah.
yeah, I
I
want to,
think once you like accept that ultimately, like everything is, we live in an absurd world, and we, by experiencing it, like we ascribe these different meanings to everything. Again, it's okay if you disagree. Like this is just what works for me. But like for the bookshelf example, it's painted wood with more thinner wood that is encased in painted wood on, like, put like side by side. Like that's so crazy. That's so crazy, you know. But so in and out of itself, a full bookshelf has no more meaning or no more value than an unfilled bookshelf. It's only if you put meaning in it. So
I love
if you
that.
are
Yeah.
okay, if you are happy that you got a new bookshelf, yeah, congrats, you have a new bookshelf. If it takes you longer to fill it or shorter to fill it, whatever, it doesn't matter, because you're happy because you have a new bookshelf, because you wanted a bookshelf, you know. And that's what should
Yes.
matter.
And see, what I love about that as it applies to this meta conversation is I feel as though a lot of these meta discussions about booktube are about the pressure to have, you know, the fine bookshelves, to have the perfect setup, to have this and that. And that's all, you know, nobody's telling you to do that. No one is telling anybody that they have to have book hauls or on their channel, or that they have to have a certain look, or that they have to do certain things. It's up to each individual to take responsibility for what they
Yeah,
really find and meaningful, valuable and meaningful for themselves in what they want to create. So that's what I find so beautiful about that message and why I resonate with it so much. And I want to share here Nerd Level Rising, who has a fantastic channel, by the way, and he's studying, if I'm not mistaken, exercise science and resistance training and muscle building, which I am so curious about. But here, and he's doing his PhD in that. But he said, I find existentialism very comforting because it means I can create my own meaning in life. I have the power and I'm not just beholden to something else's will. It's a very positive one to me. Yeah. And I mean, I kind of land somewhere in the middle with this. I do think we have questionable free will. I mean, I'm always on the fence about that. But at the same time, I'm like, if I can at least do, you know, even if we don't have free will, if I can at least believe I do, and which I'm always going to try to behave and act as though I do. I don't think I even have a choice about that. Then I am going to err towards that. I am going to err towards trying to create my own meaning in life and trying to hone in on what's essential, what's meaningful, and not go by this idea that society says or
yeah.
booktube says or algorithm. I don't know. Do you have thoughts about this, Tom? I would love to hear your thoughts on this
Yeah,
topic.
no, I mean, I think for the most part, I agree with what you guys are saying. Getting, whatever you find meaningful, that's really what matters. Whatever fills your bucket, that's what's great. I will say, when people talk about the algorithm, it's a little bit of a trigger for me because
Mhm.
I think they act like it's something that it's probably not. And I don't know. It's one of those terms that the algorithm, blaming the algorithm, all of these things, it just, in the conversation a whole, that one drives me crazy, especially,
Yeah.
so I work in technology. And so I can only imagine what kind of mechanisms YouTube and Google have in the background going on to like actually make any of this work. Like the fact that YouTube is, what, almost coming up on 2 decades old, and you can go find videos that are that old. Like, this is going to get super nerdy here for a second, but like the amount of technology that they're using to have infrastructure that can host, handle, and store all of this and still be readily available, like anybody acting like they have any idea about what they're doing back there unless they work there is just, I don't know, it just kind of breaks my brain a little bit because I just don't think anybody has any idea.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And even people who like, there are people who probably are like YouTube consultants for like channels with like millions of views, and they probably have it down to like some kind of science. And even them, they don't, like, they have some idea, but not enough.
That's
At least,
interesting. I love
yeah,
hearing that perspective. Thanks for
yeah,
sharing that.
yeah.
Yeah. I heard Jared Henderson on Bell Tubes, For Whom the Bell Tolls, the other night. Fantastic discussion show from my friend Brian at Bell Tube. Jared was saying that he prefers people not to use that word algorithm. He said that instead of using that word, replace algorithm with audience. Think of what the audience might want. And I thought that was maybe a more useful way of thinking about it, but
Hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah, I actually saw that, him talking about that, and he used to work in tech too, so he might. I wonder what he would think about. There's just the amount of technology that is going on behind the scenes at a company like YouTube and Google. It would absolutely break break your brain. And so, like, I don't even, like, I have no idea. Like, I work in technology, I have a computer science degree. This is something I deal with, not YouTube kind of stuff, but I, work in that kind of field. And there's no way I could walk in and have any idea what's going on. So, like, people who aren't there, I don't know, triggers me a little bit.
Do you think that
Yeah.
it is random, or do you like what do you think?
So I doubt it's exactly random, right? But I mean, you got to look at what YouTube's goal would probably be. His YouTube's goal would be to get as much money out of channels and videos as possible, right? Because it's YouTube and Google in the end is an advertising company. That's where they make their money from. So they're going to do things that make that happen. And you also have to consider, what are they testing? Who are they testing things on? And all of those kinds of things. Everybody, the scale this is probably based on is basically incomprehensible to most people. They probably have multiple teams working on multiple different features on the algorithm at the same time that is affecting millions of people differently. Like, all three of us could have the exact same behavior on our end and end up with different kind of outcomes because they're testing things constantly. So,
Yeah. I also want to
So I
bring
have,
up
sorry.
sorry, I'm just bringing up Jimmy's comment here because I know Jimmy also works in tech. So
mm,
cool. Go ahead. Sorry.
So I'm curious what you think. I'm just going to probe your brain a bit.
sure.
Ludwig, I think that's how you pronounce his name.
Hmm.
He's like the streamer.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar.
Yeah.
And some time ago, he had this video saying the algorithm isn't random. You just need to make a good video that people are interested in. And he created like a second channel that was connected to his channel, not promoted by his channel, and he made a viral video or something like to test that theory. And then there was a response video from another YouTuber that said he is right. And I don't know, are you familiar with this discussion? And if so, then what are your thoughts?
So no, I haven't seen that actually, and I think it goes back to what I was saying about YouTube's goal is to make money, and to
Mm-hmm.
pretend that it's anything else isn't. And if I'm sure there are people, like I said, who study this way more closely than I do, and they probably do know some of the knobs and buttons that they can turn and press that, in general, produces a more positive outcome for videos, but that doesn't make it random. So does that answer your question? Like, I don't really think it's
Yeah.
random, but there is definitely and this probably comes back to some of the testing and the constant changes that are happening on the algorithm, that just because something works today doesn't mean it's going to work tomorrow. And so like being really on top of that, I think you can, but in the grand scheme of things, you're not going to be able to like really game the system.
Interesting. So in my video, I introduced also this thing called the locus theory, the locus of control theory.
Control.
Yeah, in psychology, and it's this idea that there are you can kind of think of there being an external locus of control where it's external factors that impact us, and then there's the internal locus of control where you as an individual affect other things in your life.
Okay.
And it's not saying that one is better than the other, because both in extremes are detrimental to you. But I think a good idea in in that theory, I just hit my mic, is that you should kind of figure out like which is more applicable to each situation, right? Because sometimes it's good to like go and realize, okay, I'm not at fault here. But on the other hand, sometimes it's good to take things like in your own hands and be like, okay, I can do better. I can whatever. So do you think that when it comes to publishing a video, it is like an external locus of control where it is just the algorithm influencing the success of a video? Or do you think that there's any sort of thing that we as creators can do to ensure a success of a video? Like as someone who works in tech, I'm curious.
So yeah, this is definitely like out of my wheelhouse. I don't want to pretend that like I know this isn't something I even work on, but just in general, are there things that you can affect outside of YouTube? Absolutely. If you built up a following somewhere else and you can get a percentage of people to come from one platform to another, that is, especially if they're not like Facebook and Instagram are technically the same company. So like how that pipeline feeds in is probably different than Instagram to YouTube. So being able to transfer over people there, that would be like an outside source that you are directly impacting in another source. So like if you have 100,000 viewers on Instagram and you can convert 10,000 of them to come watch your YouTube video, that's something that you did completely independently. Now, how YouTube's backend is going to interpret that and then push things out, who knows?
Okay.
My assumption would be if you got that big influence, and then they have all kinds of other metrics that they're looking at, like how long people are watching, those kinds of things, what kind of users they are, because a YouTube Premium user is worth more than a standard like YouTube viewer, all kinds of things that they're going to go. And then on top of that 10,000 people, like I said, they're probably testing who knows how many projects that nobody knows about to affect this on who knows what percentage of those viewers come back to it. If I had to guess.
Thank you
like
for
I
your
said.
perspective.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I do like the balance of the locus of control way of seeing things. I love that aspect of psychology. I was like really into this to the theory of attribution theory as well. I don't know if you know what that is. It's like how we attribute our success. But I think when it comes to all of that Tom just explained, I'm like, it just makes me more honed in on I'm just going to do what I find purposeful and meaningful. And sometimes that means a video will perform badly, I guess.
Yeah.
And sometimes I feel like we can kind of guess. For example, I did my Clara and the Sun review, which is a Nishigudo book review. It's not necessarily my niche genre here on my channel. And I posted that, a couple weeks ago on my birthday. And I'm proud of that review. I felt very passionate about the book. I wanted to talk about it. I did feel kind of like, okay, I'm being a hipster posting a review on a book that I know a lot of my audience probably doesn't care about. But so yeah, it didn't perform super well, and it is a little disheartening when that happens. But there was still part of me that felt like I just have to do it. I can't help it. I have to talk about what I'm passionate about. This is why I'm doing what I'm doing. And so it's that essentialism, that we're talking about. And, I think that's so important, is just I feel like I would lose my motivation if everything I did on my channel was about trying to get as many views as possible. You know what I mean? I feel like I would just burn out so quickly. I don't think I would still be here.
Oh, absolutely. I didn't post James Bond book reviews thinking that was going to be like a big help to the channel, but I just wanted to talk about those books, and
Yeah.
so I totally feel you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I was the same with my Irish authors reading vlog sort of thing that I did. I
Yeah.
just, I wanted to have a nice road trip with my Irish author books, and I wanted to make a cute little video about it. And yeah, it's one of my like worst performing videos, but guess what? I had fun. And
Yes.
that's
Yeah,
the most
exactly.
important thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there are so many videos like that. Like one of my favorite videos, not to like shameless plug here at all, but like one of my favorite videos I made this year was on and this is just shows how weird it all is, was on keeping a reading journal because I'm passionate about journaling. It's a side passion of mine.
Hmm.
And I looked at the video the other day and thought, I'm still really proud of that video and I still stand by everything I said in it. And it's still to this day, I think, one of my lower performing videos. But and I think part of that, there are journaling videos like Jared Henderson's channel that explode on BookTube or on YouTube in general. Um, obviously, that's not how YouTube interprets my channel and my viewership, whatever. I don't care. I'm still proud of that video and it still was meaningful to me. So yeah, I think, and I'm grateful that the people that watched it appreciated it. That's the most important thing. And shout out to Talking Story because he was a huge influence on encouraging me to do that video. Him and Christopher Navo in my Why Read episode with them earlier this year. There was something else I was going to say about this, and I cannot remember. Oh, yes, your Irish video. So I have not watched it yet, but I saw that you had one, and I thought, oh, I need to watch that. This is a little bit more tangential to what we're talking about, but have you have you ever heard of or do you know of the author Claire Keegan?
I do. Yeah, I really need to read her things. I was thinking, so okay, this is like me thinking more algorithm wise, but
Sure.
I think one of her books is being adapted at some point, and so I know that I want to read her books, but if I publish the video now, it's going to do worse than if I publish it then. And I already have a swarmed schedule right now. And so I'm probably going to just keep in the back of my mind when the adaptation is coming out so that then I can read the books and publish it around the same
Oh,
time.
cool. Well, I will look
Yeah.
forward to watching that because I've read 2 of her books this year and I love them. They're both super, super short too. So you
Oh.
could definitely knock them out really quickly. Yeah.
Was is the one that's being adapted something like small things, I think?
Small
Is
Things
that the
Like These
one?
is probably it. Yeah, that's the first one I read. I loved that. So
Really?
Small Things Like These, and the other book is Foster. And just FYI, Claire Keegan, very slice of life, very short, concise, but beautifully written. So much underneath the surface. Tom, I think you would like her books because she reminds me a little bit of Hemingway in that way, in
Okay.
the sense that she has a beautiful simplicity to her prose, but there's so much under the surface. There's so much that if you peel back the layers, like, whoa,
Yeah.
there's so much emotion there. There's so much subtext. So,
Okay.
yeah, I know
Yeah.
that's kind of a random point to this, but
No, that's,
oh, and
look.
that's another one. Okay, so we have to talk about that too because
Oh, yes.
Tom and I are huge fans. So we have 3 huge fans here of All the Pretty Horses.
Yes.
Ah, I love that book
So
so
good.
much. Love that book.
Yep.
Um, there is an adaptation of that book as well, and I saw part of it several years ago, and I remember it not being very good, and I remember my mom saying it wasn't good. So don't recommend the adaptation, but
I didn't know there was one.
yeah, with Penelope
Oh,
Cruz playing Alejandra, I guess, but
oh,
Yeah.
okay. Interesting.
so
Yeah, no,
talk
that's
about
a
that. I wanna
fan.
hear from both of you some love of All the Pretty Horses.
I
Tom,
think
you
I.
go.
Oh, yeah, sure. I think the I think I talked about this, but that is a book that did remind me of a Hemingway book a little bit, for sure. And I kind of went into my reading experience with that book with my arms crossed because I had a couple not so great experiences with McCarthy coming into it after I read The Road, which was great, and then I read Blood Meridian, which was fine. That's a book that I think that's a book I would need to go back to and reread. I think that is a me thing versus a book thing, and maybe that's reading for an enjoyment versus like what the book is trying to do. And then I read one or two of his other books that I didn't really like, and I was kind of like, this is probably the last one. If I don't like this one, okay, he had that one book that I really liked, and then I went into it and I was just kind of sucked in super quickly. The setting, just the tone of the story, and then just going on like that adventure, even though it's not the most fun adventure, I would say, but then just all that little slow going, taking our time, building up what's going on, and then just some of the chaos that happens in it too is something that I was just like, oh wow, it kind of subverted some of my expectations and everything. And so it was just one of those books that's like, I just love it,
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's such a good story arc too. It's like such a
Yes.
great coming of age story.
Yep.
It has such a beautiful, powerful beginning of a journey, end of a journey,
Yep.
growth along the way. I feel like John Grady is a character. I think that's the character's name. I feel like
Yeah.
I just loved his perspective, being in his mind. I feel like he had such a maturity, like a development of a maturity that happens over the course of the story.
Yeah.
I love that book. There was something about it that just really, really spoke to me.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Same.
I'm just rifling through it, trying to see if there's anything that I can read out loud that really spoke to me. But oh man, okay. So for example, because I don't want to say anything that could be like spoilery, but
Yeah.
I want to give the watchers a taste. Sorry, I'm being such a nerd. But so for example, there's so much in this story about love and grief and loss of innocence, and
Yes.
so and there's also a lot about grief, like uniting people. Rilke in Letters to a Young Poet
I
said
love that
something. I
book.
love that
Sorry.
book.
One of
He
my
says
favorites.
in one of his letters, because he's writing to like this guy, Capus, I think, and he writes to him and says, know that the person who is telling you these words like has also he says them because he has been hurt before as well. And it's also this idea of like I understand you because I'm in pain as well. And anyway, so there's like this passage here, for example. Gustavo said to me that those who have suffered great pain of injury or loss are joined to one another with bonds of a special authority, and so it has proved to be. The closest bonds we ever know are bonds of grief, the deepest community, one of sorrow. And like, that's so melancholic, but that's so, I don't know, it's the way he says it, it's so beautiful to me. And then later on, in the end, we all come to be cured of our sentiments. Those whom life does not cure, death will. The world is quite ruthless in selecting between the dream and the reality, even where we will not. Between the wish and the thing, between the wish and the thing, the world lies waiting. I don't know.
Wow.
I just broke my cup. Sorry.
Oh, no.
Anyway, I was so invested in my McCarthy that I need to like clear my area. Sorry.
I think
I love this book.
I think I would say that is my favorite McCarthy. I did start my journey with No Country for Old Men many years ago, and part of it could have just been my reading taste at the time and different expectations, but I just wasn't overall super impressed with that book. It just didn't really do much for me. And then the next one I read was Blood Meridian, and my buddy read that with Jimmy. And the nice thing about it is he had read it before, and because he let me know it was very dense, we decided to read it very slowly together, like 10 pages a day, maybe 10 to 15 pages a day. And I would highly recommend anybody who's reading Blood Meridian go that slow because it is dense prose, very, very rich. There's so much to take in. I feel like I could even benefit from another reread or two just to get everything out of it. But I did love it. I did love Blood Meridian. And then the next year we read All the Pretty Horses. But All the Pretty Horses, I feel like is the best McCarthy I've read so far. And I've read a couple of others. I've read The Sunset Limited and The Crossing. The Crossing. I also read those with Jimmy. But I think All the Pretty Horses is the best balance of his like sparse prose and his more poetic, poignant prose, the melancholic prose, as you were saying, Vera. Yes, so many great quotes, as Habitual Blood says here. I thought that the story arc too, it's maybe
Yes.
the more conventional story arc that I've read in a McCarthy story, but it was so beautiful. It was powerful. I loved it. Yeah, huge
Yeah.
fan.
Yeah,
Did
that's one
you?
of the books I
Sorry.
wish I had a physical copy of that I could have like gone and highlighted through because I'm mostly an audio person, and so I even remember when I was listening to it just being like, that was so beautiful. I wish I had like I know you can like clip stuff in your audio books, but it's not the same as like being able to go back to it and just reading some of those like beautiful lines that are in there. And I don't feel that way about a lot of books, but that one in particular, I was like, oh, I wish I had a highlighter right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you read The Road?
I have not. That's one so I understand. So this is a block I need to break.
This was me at the end crying.
Oh,
Yeah, that's a yeah.
I think I saw that on Instagram.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. So this is a block in my own psyche that I need to bust through because I've proven myself wrong so many times. And for some reason, it's still a barrier for me. But if I hear a book is dystopian, for some reason, it makes me less motivated to read it. And I don't know
Hmm,
what my problem is. Like it makes
interesting.
no sense. Oh, you're the same way?
No, Joanna, I can tell you right now, that doesn't matter.
Yeah, I
It's
believe you.
the world building, it doesn't really matter. Like that's not the point. Like the environment itself is very much a character, but like in the story. But I think so. I will be saying this like mostly as a joke in my video that I'll make on him. But I think The Road is mandatory reading for fathers. Like
Oh,
you get your baby, you get your wife, you leave the ward, and the the I don't know, your obstetrician or gynecologist, whatever, they should just hand you The Road and be like, read now, because it's the story of fatherhood, and clearly I know loads about that, but no, after this I was like, oh my gosh, it's 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 the story of the love and fears that you have for your child and how much you would sacrifice for them, the lengths you would go to, and again, loss of innocence. McCarthy is so good at loss of innocence, and man, it's like the dystopian element. It doesn't matter. Like it's definitely an element, but just you can think of it as a father and a son journeying through the wilderness if you want to.
he really loves the father-son theme. That is
I
something I've
love.
noticed in all of his books, and I feel like he's really something he often does with that particular, theme is he also seems to relate it to the relationship that a man has with God, like projecting thoughts of fatherhood on a God-like figure, and I feel like that comes through in some of the more biblical kind of prose that he talks of that he has in his books. That's something I noticed anyway. I am curious. I will read it at some point. It looks like habitual prose. Blood was not as big a fan of the prose being sparse. I don't know. I'll give it a shot though for sure. I think it would be
And it's
enjoyable.
so short. It's so short.
It is
Like, look
Yeah,
short,
how
yeah.
big. Do you see how big the text is? This is 300
yeah,
pages
yeah,
of this text. Like this, like that's huge, you know?
yes.
So,
Well, and here's the thing. Like one of my favorite books that I've read this year is Clara and the Sun by Ishiguro, and
Hmm.
that book has so little world building. I mean, there is intriguing things about what's going on in the world, but he doesn't really flesh it out in detail at all. It is the most minimal approach to world building in any book ever, in some ways. And and actually, I've heard Ishiguro in an interview say that that's actually an afterthought for him. Like that's not what he focuses on as a writer. He focuses on character, on theme, on ideas, and then afterwards makes the world fit whatever he's doing with the story. So it's not his central focus, but of course he puts attention on it. I'm not saying he's careless with it. He does put attention on it and he does do interesting things with it, but it's not like the most detailed Jenny Wirtz or Steven Erickson style world building. And so, yeah, I can get behind that kind of story, clearly. I don't know what my
Yeah.
problem is, why I get so
But
blocked.
you're really selling Ishiguro for me. I have Never Let Me Go right there on my little book pile, so I really want to get to him
Oh, I
too.
hope you like him. I hope you like him. I know that one in particular is very polarizing. Some people consider it their favorite book by Ishiguro, and then some people consider it their least favorite. Some people don't like it. But I would say on the whole, okay, so this is how I got interested in Nishiguro. I got interested in Nishiguro, and by the way, thank you so much, BellTube. I had such a fantastic time
No, I
on For
did
Whom
too.
the Bell Tolls, and I would be delighted to watch Vera on For Whom the Bell Tolls and hear her One for the Road. So just want to say that here now. But I would say that one of the reasons I got interested in Nishiguro is because about a year ago, maybe a little more than a year ago, I fell down a rabbit hole because somebody recommended Never Let Me Go to me. And I started looking for YouTube videos on Ishiguro. I found several videos at the time where people had read all of his books, ranked all of his books. And the amazing thing is that no two ranking videos were the same. Everyone seems to have a very different favorite when it comes to Ishiguro. Secondly, all of his books are different. So he has one that's like an Arthurian fantasy kind of story. He has a couple that are a little more sci-fi based, others that are more like one about a butler that's more slice of life literary fiction, and then just a lot of various types of stories. And then thirdly, even though the ranking videos I watched, even though they all had a different order, every person I watched who had a ranking video, there weren't that many, but the ones I watched, they all loved all of his books. Even the one they ranked least favorite, they're like, "Yeah, it's my least favorite, but it's still good. It's
Hmm.
still good. It's still Ishiguro." I'm like, "That's how you know you have a good author." That's kind of like how I
That's
feel a
impressive.
lot of us are with Abercrombie, for example. Some of us might, have least favorite with his standalones or whatever. I think my least favorite is probably The Blade itself, the first book, but I love Abercrombie. I love all his books. I'm a huge fan. So I think that that to me told me this is a special author. This is someone I want to check out. And yeah, it would be clickbait for me if you did an Ishiguro themed video, Vera.
Yeah. Tom, have you read any Ishiguro?
I have not, and I have not read any Joe Abercrombie. Just to, like
Oh
really
yeah.
big,
Okay.
really just hurt you guys.
Don't stop at book
Sir.
one. That's all I'll say.
Yeah. I have this really bad thing where there are certain books and series that I'm just like, oh, I know I'm gonna really like that, so I'll read it at some point, and I don't read it right away. Uh, and Joe Abercrombie's one of those where I'm like, I'm pretty confident that I'm gonna absolutely love those books, and so I just keep not reading them for
Well,
whatever
some
reason.
people don't like them. I'll be honest. Like I have friends on BookTube who don't like
Okay.
Abercrombie, and what I've always said is I was very mid or mixed about book one, The Blade itself. I
Hmm.
felt like at the time, for me personally, I felt like the story kind of meandered. I felt like I lost my focus with it a little bit. But I did note that I loved his writing style. I loved his sense of humor, and I loved his character work. And
Hmm.
so even though for me, the story itself didn't quite hit the high marks for me that first book, I would say if you like those 3 things, if you like his humor, if you like his writing style, and you like his character work, keep going.
Yeah.
And for me, book 2 was, like, revolutionary for me because before I read the second book in the First Law trilogy, Before They Were Hanged, I always considered myself somebody who had to have the balance of, like, a really clear, interesting, intriguing, plot, and
Hmm.
then something that also had great characters. I needed both, the best of both worlds. In
Yeah.
book 2, I realized I don't even care about the mission of where we're going or what we're doing. I love the characters so much that
Yeah.
I don't care. Like, I loved the characters so much and the combination of characters, the way that they interacted, the dialogue, the humor. So I don't know, for me, it changed me as a reader in some ways, but I would say, like, for me, like, read on. What are your thoughts on that, Vera?
Joanna, you're speaking my language. So I have a few friends online who are haters, and they're wrong because they don't like Joe Abercrombie. But man, how do I say this? It's it's so impactful. Matt in one of his Matt's fantasy book reviews, when he was reviewing, I think it was book 2 of the sequel trilogy, which is called Age of Madness. He said something like, wow, like this book is one that I wouldn't recommend you when you're starting off your fantasy journey, because it's so good it will ruin other fantasy books for you. Like this will be your barrier, and everything is going to fall short, like except for like a few, but like everything's going to fall short. And when I read The Wisdom of Crowds, my life has been changed. I think about it daily. It's
Good.
man, Tom, please read it.
Because it gets better and better and better. Like the Age of
Yes.
Madness, the last trilogy, builds on everything before it, and it's way more thematic, and it's absolutely incredible.
And Tom,
Yeah.
can I just say this, because like I want you to love it. I need you to love it. I need you to love it. I need everyone to love Joe Abercrombie. But so the way he says it now is he wrote while The Blade itself was being published, the last argument of Kings was going through final revisions. Okay, so he wrote the story of First Law as one continuous
That makes
narrative.
sense. Yes.
And in Age of Madness, I don't remember if it was the same in the First Law trilogy, but in Age of Madness, when you start book 2, it's not part 1, part 2, part 3, it's part 4, part but yeah, part 6. And so that's very, once you understand the mentality of this isn't one installment, it's one big story, you're gonna appreciate it so much more. And Joe himself, or Mr. Abercrombie, has he has gone back and said that, you know, The Blade itself was his first ever published book, and he probably should have included more plot. Like, I'm gonna tell you straight up, there's one plot point in the middle of the book, and then there's a plot point at the end of the book, and that's it. Like, that's it. However, when you get to book 2, and it's also a subversion of Lord of the Rings. And so if you think of it like from that perspective as well, and you start kind of saying, okay, this is a subversion of this character, and that's this character, and
Yep. Yes, and that's another reason I wouldn't recommend it. Actually, I wouldn't recommend it to somebody who's beginning their fantasy journey, because I don't know that you would I don't know that somebody would be able to appreciate all the subversions it's doing with the genre conventions. Like, if you have a really clear understanding of the genre conventions, which I think most people do anyway, because they've maybe watched Lord of the Rings or whatever. But I would recommend that. And I also will point out, I wanted to bring up this comment here by Aslan. I absolutely love Abercrombie's writing style and craft, but I feel the general air of nihilism difficult, and I still don't know what I think of the humanization of a torturer. So it is, I mean, I think he balances this nihilism with a huge dose of humor, but it is nihilistic. Like, the stories do kind of border on the line of nihilism, in the sense that people maybe don't change, if I could say it that way. So I know a lot of people get turned off by that. So I just want to say that.
That won't bother me.
Yeah. Tom, you read Death's End, you'll be fine.
That's true. Yeah.
You'll be so fine.
Good point.
And like, for me, I'd say calling it nihilism is going a bit far, because these same friends that I have that tear into me for saying this, but they say that my take is crazy, because I think that there is hope in these books. It's just that when things are happy and calm and whatever, it's easy to say, yeah, I have hope. You know, I have a good outlook for the future. These characters, especially, Joanna, did you read Age of Madness?
I did. Yeah, I've read all of them.
Okay.
Except I have not read Sharp Ends, the short story collection.
Fine. Yeah. There is there's not a lot of it, because I would say that Joe Abercrombie is honest in the portrayal of humanity. Like, what we need to realize, we're in like a, all things considered, quite coddled moment in time, at least when compared to like the Middle Ages and stuff. And so I think he reads so much nonfiction. He really knows his stuff, and I think his portrayal of humanity is honest, and it's, I don't know, animalistic at times. I wouldn't say it goes into nihilism because it does have that hope. And there is a thread that ties, or a character with a certain motivation that ties all the way from the first trilogy to then a huge reveal in the second trilogy. And if you read that and you tell me that that wasn't hopeful, you're just wrong. Like, yeah, this character does the things they need to do in a that, like, yeah, awful way sometimes, but that's because this character understands how the world works and isn't coddling themselves, and lying to themselves that, oh, if I become a better person, the world will be better. This character is like, no, I will be awful because that's what the world requires of me to make it better.
I can see
But
that. I can see what, I
and
think I know
I
what
don't know, for
character
me
you're
it was
talking. I
hopeful.
think I know what character you're talking about. And I can see, honestly, I actually thought I felt like I could see hope in the first trilogy even. I know that's
Yeah.
like a completely controversial opinion. But I did feel like I got hopeful because of certain things with certain characters. But at the same time, yeah, I think that maybe where people come with that too is that if you look at it from a fantasy idealism perspective, characters
Yeah,
are not
definitely.
going to you're not gonna get like Vin and Mistborn, like you're not gonna get that kind of transformation,
Yeah.
I would say.
Yeah, definitely. I'd agree with that. I think, like, if you want a character to root for the entire time, you're not going to get that. But I also think that this is, again, like, more honest to real life. Like, everyone does terrible things sometimes. Like, okay, like, yeah, we're not like murderers and whatever, hopefully. But I mean, I've been told that I'm starting a cult by doing any interpretation of books ever. So,
Hmm.
take that as you will.
What?
But
Yeah.
I'm not starting a cult, by the way. Like, that's a joke for, like, the people
Yeah.
that watch my channel sometimes. But um, I just, yeah, I really love this series. And Tom, I want you to read it and read it back to back. And I hope you love it.
But
I
yeah, this
have
has been one of the series I've been like, I'll read it. It's been like on my list forever, and I'm just like, yeah, I'll like it, and so I just keep like, yeah, I'll get to it at some point. Dude, I don't know why I do that with a lot of series. I did it with Sanderson for the longest time. I did it with the Wheel of Time for the longest time. I'm still currently doing it with the Sun Eater series. Like, it's just, I don't know why I do it, but yeah.
Yeah, I think you'll have a good time. I feel like they are paced really well. I mean, I found the first trilogy, it's like Vera said, you kind of think of it as one big story. So I
Hmm.
think that's important to consider. But his writing style just flows so well. I do agree with Matt here. I think there is world building in terms of culture and society, especially in Age of Madness, but it's not the most detailed, fleshed out world building like you would get in Wheel of Time or, some kind of grander series like that.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think you'd enjoy it. I think you would enjoy it, and I'd highly recommend because you do listen to audiobooks. I
I've
immersion read
heard.
them,
Uh-huh.
so I don't really like just listening to, fantasy books. If I'm gonna audiobook a fantasy book, I usually like to have my eyes on the page too.
Hmm.
But I did immersion read those, and I cannot recommend them more. One of the best audiobook narrators of all time, Stephen Pacey.
Yeah, I've
Yeah.
heard that they're super good. So do you guys have any big blind spots like I have? First Law is like a big one in this fantasy sphere of like series that obviously I guess you could count Wheel of Time for you, but do you have any other ones that come to mind of like these are the ones everyone feels like they talk about and have read that you
Oh,
feel like you need to
yes.
get to?
You first, Vera. I have
No, you go first. I feel like I just ramble all the time. So
no, I don't mind. Not at all. Not at all. Yeah, I've enjoyed everything you've had to say. So please don't feel that way. Yeah, so for me, I would say I've read Farseer trilogy by Robin Hobb,
Okay.
but I have not continued to live ship. And I have my good friend here in the chat, Derry from Derry's read it before. I had just highlighted one of her comments. She says here, I agree with Joanna to enjoy all the play with the tropes and stereotypes you need to be familiar with them to begin with. But Derry, I have to highlight Derry here because she is like the Robin Hobb queen. She
Mm,
has so many informative videos on Realm of the Elderlings. I read Farseer a few years ago and I loved it. I loved my journey with that particular trilogy. And I understand, Vera, you're reading it right now. So I have to hear your thoughts on this trilogy. But I have not continued. I have not continued yet with
okay.
Live Ship Traders. I have Ship of Magic on my shelf. For the last 2 years, I've said, "I'm going to read Live Ship this year. This is gonna be my year." I've
Uh-huh.
even made a deal with myself that I will vlog my experience with Ship of Magic, but I just keep getting distracted, and part of it is because when you all were talking about multiple series on your plate at one time,
Hmm.
I'm currently, I think I'm past the halfway point now in Wars of Light and Shadow by Jenny Wirtz.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That series takes time. It is
Yes.
long, and there are
Yes.
no audiobooks, so, I read even more slowly when I'm just visual reading and not immersion reading, which is fine, but it's taking a long time, and so
Yeah.
because it's this heavy, heavy epic fantasy series with very lush, extremely rich prose, I mean,
Hmm.
complex sentences, it's very elaborate. I feel like there's just no way. I can't do it.
Yeah.
I can't add much more. I am doing another couple of series right now too, but I just can't add. I don't know. I need to have fewer epic fantasy series on my plate. So that's the one I would say that I'm not yet finished,
Okay.
that I feel like is a huge deficit for me. And Dandelion Dynasty, which I'm gonna be starting at
Uh,
please at some point. Yeah.
that's a yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I need to read Dandelion Dynasty as well, because Ken Liu, I think he's so great. He also, I believe, translated some of the Remembrance of Earth's Past trilogy, and I really want to read some of his own work. So, okay, Robin Hobb. So I'm halfway through Royal Assassin. I'm not loving it.
Oh, no.
I'm dreading the video that I'll make on this because there's so many people.
I
There's
am
so
not
many people that want me to like love it.
I wanted to
And
ask
I
you about that because
don't.
I did see you were listening to the audiobook, which by the way, I am very, very much like audiobook listening is reading, fight me on it. But I would say I have avoided the audiobooks for Robin Hobb because I've heard that, as Jerry says here, that the audiobooks for her series are just terrible. Like they're
Oh,
really, really, really bad. I don't know if that's
interesting.
affecting it.
Yeah.
It might not. I'm sure you have other your reasons, but just wanted to put that out there too.
Yeah, so for me, now that I'm back in college, I just if I don't audiobook a lot, I just won't get any reading done. And so, my McCarthy's are quite short and it's a book that I want to have like in my hand and like writing. But in Poland, so not sponsored, never had a sponsor, but there's this app called Storytel, and you can get it even though there's no, I don't think there's any like US equivalent or whatever, but like you can get the Polish version because it has like English books, and it works kind of like Netflix. So you pay for the catalog, and then you can, depending which plan you're on, you can either listen to like a couple, like 10 hours, I think, or you can have just access to the full catalog for the month, but you pay a bit more. And when I saw that Storytel had, I will talk to you about it, Derry, because I want to love it so bad. But sorry. But when I saw that they have the Farseer trilogy, the entire thing, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so perfect. I'm finally gonna jump in on the train. The Farseer, yeah, I saw that as well. That the Farseer audio is like not great, but that Live Ship is awful, and that I
Okay.
can't do Live Ship on audio. But man, I really, really want to love it. Hi, Matt. I really want to love it, and I feel so bad that I don't. I've been watching videos about it to hype myself up,
Oh
but
man.
then, I
You
don't
know
know. I
what
feel
though?
so bad.
If you don't like the character of Fitz, there's just
I don't
that's just
think he
gonna
has a personality. He doesn't. Sorry, like
No.
he doesn't have a personality. His personality is, I give my life to the king. Spoil insert
Oh,
character's name
no.
here. I love you, but I can't have you. And I'm like,
I have friends who don't like Fitz, so I totally, I think it's
I
completely
want to love him.
valid. Just I'm saying it here. I love Fitz, but it's completely valid. If you don't love Fitz, it's not gonna be for you, you know?
I promised that I would get through Farseer trilogy and Life Ship, and that if I don't like Life Ship, then I don't have to continue.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you guys have any like series that are super popular that you want to love, but for some reason you just
Mm.
don't?
Yes, for me, I'll get some pushback in the chat, I'm sure. I read Jade City a few years ago. It was actually before I started a channel, and I was there were things to like about it. I'm not gonna be totally ranting about it, right? Okay? But I was so bored. I was so bored. I had a library book, and I remember at the time I was just it was during lockdown, and I remember just, having all this time, so I was reading, and I would flip a page, yawn, flip the next page, yawn,
Oh no.
and my husband said, "Please DNF the book," and I'm really stubborn about DNFing books, so I read it. I finished it, and I was like, "I'm going to love this book. I'm determined. This is supposed to be like, oh gosh, I cannot think of the name now. Godfather. It's supposed to be a Godfather in fantasy. I
Mm.
love the Godfather 1 and 2 movies. I love those movies. Not so much Godfather 3, but that's another situation. But I love those movies. Why am I not loving this book? And so I was so bored. I was so, so bored. I did try with the audiobook last year or a year or two ago. I checked it out from my library. And so I started that, and it was better. It was better via audio. I still had the same problems with it, but it was better. And then I still didn't feel motivated to pick it up. And then my hold ran out, and so I
Oh
just kind of
yeah.
gave up after that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What
I
but
don't
about
I
you,
know
really
Will?
have one.
it's a huge booktube darling. People adore that
Yeah, they
trilogy.
do. Yeah, I see people talk super high. That's one I haven't read yet either. I actually don't think I really have one that I don't like. I think the closest thing I have to it is it's just a single standalone book. It's actually historical fiction. It's not even a fantasy book, but it's Gates of Fire.
Oh,
Um,
I felt the same way you did about this.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I remember us talking about it a little bit, and so that's really the one where I've gotten some like, how do you not like this and all this, and I don't know. I
Oh,
just
yes,
didn't.
I totally
Yeah,
get you on that because
yeah. I
it's
just
so well written, and yet
it's
it just
so well done.
didn't do anything for me. And
Yep.
but I know we're not alone about that. Like Alan from the Library of Alexandria also struggled with that book.
Okay.
I don't know why though. I can't even figure it out. I'm like, this is really well written. This is really good
It's
prose. Um,
the story is done super well. It has great arcs, everything that you think you want when you're like putting ingredients
yeah,
into a book, and then
yes,
it just comes out and it's not good.
exactly. I felt the
Yeah.
same way. I felt
Yeah.
exactly the same way. I still that's the one I have a big block on because
Yeah.
usually I can figure it out. I can hone in and like this is the aspect of the book that's not working for me. That book is kind of like a big mystery to me.
Yeah. Exactly the same for me. Because when I had it sold to me, I was like, oh, this is absolutely going to be great. It's going to be awesome. Maybe this will be the book that gets me into some of this like historical fiction kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And if anything, it's kind of scared me away from it.
But I would say, if you like historical fiction, maybe try the Warlord Chronicles by Bernard
Mm,
Cornwell.
yeah.
That's like my favorite. It's one of my favorite trilogies of all time. Love it. Book one is a bit tedious because it gives you so many names and places, lots of exposition, slow book one, but
Hmm.
huge payoff. Even at the end of book one, it just starts to go and go. It's phenomenal. I
I
love it.
know.
And I would say actually, I think Abercrombie fans might like that trilogy. I'll just go ahead and put
I
myself
think
on.
The
Laura says the
Bernard.
same
Is that
thing.
the wolf thing?
No, it's called Warlord Chronicles, and it's by Bernard Cornwell, and it's an Arthurian retelling. And I'm always trying to get Philip Chase to read it because this is so in his wheelhouse.
Hmm.
Oh, it's so good though. Yes, Brian knows what's up. Warlord rocks. It really, really does.
I've only heard good things about it. I know Laura from Fantasy Awash. I've done a couple videos with her, and she like dedicated like a month of her life to those books. Basically, she
I'm
was
the
just
one who
like,
got her to read it
"Oh,
too.
are
So
you? Oh, okay,
yes,
that's
because I was like,
awesome."
"Laura, you know Arthurian lore. Why
Yeah,
are you not reading Warlord?" And so, yeah, she was obsessed with it, which is hard to do with Laura these days because all she wants to do these days is reread A Court of Ferns and Roses, but but she really loved it. So,
yeah,
yay.
yeah. She did.
I
Yes.
added it to my TBR on Goodreads right now. I think the
Yay.
Gwyn brothers also talked about it. I
Oh,
think
they
Will
talk
really
about it
loves
all the
it.
time.
Yeah.
I'm
Yes.
sure. Yeah.
They're huge fans. So I also use that in my case for Philip. I'm like, because he loves the Brothers Gwyn. I'm like, he's had them on his channel several times. I'm like, they love this series too. I know it's been influential on John Gwynn and a lot of writers. A lot of writers love Cornwell because his prose is so good. He can write, and it's funny because I usually say about myself, I'm not usually a heavy battle scene, and I think I'm wrong about that. I think it just really depends.
It
But
just
his
yeah.
battle scenes are just some of my favorite. Like it's emotional. It's like a huge range of emotions in that trilogy. Like they'll make you laugh at times, like in a sort of sarcastic, cynical way. They'll make you cry. They'll make you pumped up and like get your adrenaline going. They're so good. They're so so good.
How would you compare them? Just yeah, most people won't know what I'm talking about, but how would you compare them to the Little People chapters from Joe Abercrombie?
Which part? Which the Warlord
I
Chronicles?
don't know if I don't know how long ago you read them, but you know how he switches perspectives during battle scenes. Those chapters are always
Yeah.
called the Little People.
Yes, I love the
I'm
Little People
curious.
I know exactly what you're talking about. I was just trying to understand in comparison to that. Yes, I love the Little People chapters. Tom, if you don't know what we're talking about, it's just this incredible device that Abercrombie uses where he has certain chapters that pan out to the common people, the common folk in the town, and you
Okay,
get their perspective. He's so good at that. Like that's actually
that's
a really
interesting. That's really
incredible
interesting.
device that he uses in Age of Madness specifically.
Hmm.
But
And the heroes.
and oh, he is this in the heroes. Gosh, I'd totally
He starts it
forgotten
in the
about that.
heroes, yeah.
Thanks for reminding me about that. Yeah. So in Warlord, we are in first person narration. So we're in a character named Derval's perspective, which I think is a really unique choice because Derval is not Arthur. He's not Merlin. He seems like more of a side character. But what's amazing about that is that he develops so much as you go on. So at first you're like, okay, there's this side character named Derval, and he's more focused on Arthur this and Arthur that, and Merlin this and Merlin that, and all the other characters. But then by book 2, man, Derval is now one of my favorite characters of all time. I love that character with all my heart. And no, he's not perfect, but I do love him. And yeah, so we don't really get, in other words, we don't pan out to get other character perspectives or other societal perspectives. But I still think Bernard Cornwell is such an excellent writer that you still get a good dose of world building, a good dose of how people are interacting, especially with the emergence of Christianity and the conflicts between paganism and Christianity at the time. Really incredible
Mm,
trilogy.
Oh my God,
interesting.
that sells it for me even more because I'm Polish. I'm very proud to be Polish. And I know some people think that I'm LARPing as a Polish girl. If you follow me on Instagram, that's why I should probably like put a pinned post why that's my bio, but I just thought it would be funny. Anyway, I'm Polish. I'm very proud to be Polish. And The Witcher, so like it's kind of like what if Christianity never came because the Slavic tribes were pagan, and so I always find paganism versus Christianity or like a monotheistic religion versus a polytheistic religion, that clash. I love that
Oh,
so
yes, yes,
much.
yes. You're
So
gonna love Warlord then.
you
Yeah.
just
If
sold
you
it to
love
me.
that. If
So
you love that, you've got to check out
yeah.
Warlord. I also agree with Brian that the combat scenes are just second to none. Just some of the best ever.
Okay.
Absolutely incredible. Yes. Oh, so by the way, have you both read the Witcher series? Because Tom,
I,
I think you mentioned something about it.
I stopped. I read the 2 short story collections and then maybe the next 2 full length novels, or maybe the first 3. I did not finish it though. Yeah.
Ah.
That's fine. So you know how before you were discussing if there are any series that you love but you wouldn't recommend to anyone? That's The Witcher for me.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's not going to be for everyone, and that's fine. The translation into English is kind of bad. Sorry.
I've heard that too.
That's what
I
I've
actually wanted to
heard.
ask you that because
Yeah,
Yeah.
I read
I
both.
hear
It's not
that.
great.
Okay.
Can I give an example? It's so
Yes, please
uh,
do.
I'll just be I'll be saying the name of a scene, but the name isn't a spoiler, in my opinion. Okay, so at some point during the series, there's this huge battle scene, which the way it takes place next to a small town, which is called they translated it to Old Bottoms. So, okay, question. If you heard the town name Old Bottoms, what would you be what would your impression be of this town?
Probably a little small, rinky dinky,
Yeah, there you
not that
go.
What
important.
do you think of the name Old Bottoms? Do you have any emotional reaction to it?
Oh, no, no, not really. No.
Yeah, okay, so that's the problem because in
Yeah.
Polish it is stare dupy, and sure that means old bottoms, but it's more like old asses or old hags or it's if you would call a battle like the of old asses, you would be like, whoa, we can't call a battle the battle of old asses or something similar because it like insinuates something about like the people like fighting being like old asses or like another translation which wouldn't be like true to the word but it would be true to the emotion that it's supposed to raise out of you. It would be like old hags or am I allowed to swear?
Yeah, go ahead.
Or like old shits or something like that. Like if
Okay.
they translated it something like that, then you're like whoa, like you can't name the battle that's like super important, the battle of old hags or old asses or old shits or whatever. Like you can't do that. So obviously then they're like, well, okay, we need to rename this battle to the battle of like a town that's like further away, but they're like, it's going to sound so much better if it's the battle of Brenna, right? And so that's why it's called the Battle of Brenna. But in English it's like, oh yeah, the Battle of Old Bottoms. Yeah.
Oh my
Okay,
goodness.
And that's just
Interesting.
one example in
Yeah.
one book. This is a 7-book series.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've read them
7.
all. I've read every Witcher book that's published.
Oh, did you read Season of Storms? Because that's the one I haven't yet. Oh,
I
okay. Then
have,
you read
yeah.
more than me. But in every single book, maybe the translation is better in Season of Storms. I don't know. But I read every single book. And I'm rereading The Last Wish right now because I want to do a plot summary video where I also touch upon the cultural influences and like translation, like mistranslations, I think. Like there's in one of the short stories, like a full paragraph is gone.
Oh wow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I'm like, what? Anyway, and so I just think so much of the humor is lost, and I love the humor, and I think Sapkowski is very similar to Joe Abercrombie when you read him in Polish.
Oh
So,
wow. That
yeah.
I think I heard that comparison one time before.
Interesting.
Yeah,
That's why I
I'm really
think I
glad
love
to hear
him.
your perspective, and I'm sure it's got to be such a superior experience to experience that series in its original language. I read this series before I started a channel. I read it the year that the last book was published, so as I think
Mhm.
Season of Storms. So I read it that year, and I read them back to back to back. So I just binged the whole entire series, and the whole time I was reading it, my enjoyment went this the whole entire time.
Mhm.
Like, sometimes I would be like, "Oh, this is so good," and then I'm like, I'm kinda taking a dip, I'm kinda taking a dip. Oh, this is so good," and then I was taking a dip. But, yeah, so I don't feel like I quite resonated with this series as much as I wanted to,
You
but at
know
the
what?
same
And that's also
time
so fine because sorry to interrupt, but
no,
another thing because like I really feel passionate about the series, so I want to
yeah,
defend. But so a big part of it is also it's just people walking from place to place, probably chasing after Siri because that's all they do. They always chase after Siri,
yes,
and it's about the conversations they have. It's about the philosophy and Geralt. For example, a big part is how he doesn't intervene in conflicts, and he has like
yes,
this huge
Mhm.
mentality of I will
mhm.
abstain if I am to choose between a greater evil and a lesser evil. I'd rather not choose at all.
He's very apolitical,
And
yes.
yeah, and he gets tested on that so
Mhm,
much,
yes,
and it's all about and it also harks back to like a lot of like my history. Like there's scenes in the 4th book, Time of Contempt, that are pretty much one-to-one uh, uh, commands that the Nazis were given from Hitler when like invading Poland and stuff like that. And like because I grew up like learning about all those things, and then I actually had to read the 1st book for school
Oh,
Oh,
in my
wow.
Polish
wow.
class.
That's
That's
cool.
cool.
Yeah, and we had to analyze the 3rd short story And another thing, some people are off put by like the sexism, and like there are like uncomfortable depictions of women, especially like in like the first few, and like it is there, but at the same time, a part of it is because of the translation. Because like in Polish, we have the same. You know, when you hug someone, you can say, "Oh, they put their head on your chest" or something like that.
Mhm.
So a lot of the times, it will be translated as like her boobs or whatever, instead of like, you know what I mean. And
Yeah.
so, sorry,
Yeah,
I'm ranting again, but yeah.
No, it
it's really
would
nice to hear.
I love this, and I do feel like some of my lack of appreciation too at the time could have been because I had a very combined idea of fantasy and maybe wasn't appreciating some of the more subtle aspects of the story. I did love how it was confronting this idea about who's the real monster, humans or these creatures. And I did love Geralt's is it Geralt or Gerald? I always forget.
Geralt,
Geralt. I
because it's
always
Geralt in Polish.
Oh,
So,
okay, Geralt.
um,
I loved his conflicts about that, like how he was always trying to stay out of situations and being tested. And more than anything, I love the characters because even though I had some ups and downs with this series, with the storyline, I still feel those characters. I felt like those characters were so vivid to me. They still stand out. I feel like it was one of the biggest omissions of my top 15 favorite female fantasy characters. When you commented about Yennefer, I'm like, oh my goodness. How could I have forgotten Yennefer? She is an all-time favorite. Like she is amazing. But I think another thing that I took with me from the Witcher series, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about this because I know a lot of fantasy, especially like, Western European fantasy focuses on this concept of found family, where you make friends along the way and they become like friend family to you. In the Witcher series, what I thought was really powerful was how you have Yennefer, you have Geralt, and then you have Ciri. And to me, they seem to form this strange kind of family unit. Even though, so I guess when I was reading the series, I kept seeing that connection there between the three of them, this very unlikely sort of found family coming together. And yet, I think part of me just kept wanting them to be together on the page more. Without spoilers, go ahead.
no, that's exactly it. Before I comment, Tom, did you read the series and do you have any thoughts?
I
I read it.
read up to, I think it is Time of Content, maybe. I don't know. I
Yeah.
think I read the first two novels. So just in general, it's one of those series that I actually don't remember a whole lot from.
Mhm.
Outside of the short story collection, actually, that I really, really liked the short story. I kind of liked
They're
the
very
Monster
good.
of the Week kind of feel to those,
Yeah.
and maybe that was part of the
I'll grab my
problem.
copy. I'll be right back. I'm just
Okay, yeah.
grabbing my copy. Yeah.
Okay,
Um,
sure.
when I went from the short stories to the actual novels, I think that was maybe one of the things that I didn't like as much. I had gotten so attached to like the short story, like Monster of the Week thing. I don't know, didn't work as well for me then. And maybe if I had started with the novels and then gone back to them, it would have been a slightly different
I
experience.
think the short stories are excellent. I would actually
Yeah,
reread the short stories for sure. And I did
yeah,
I like the monster of the week idea
yeah.
too. I'm just gonna highlight a couple of comments while Vera is finding that too. And feel free, Tom, if you want to continue any thoughts about it. Um,
So what I want to say is just a slight correction. The series has 7 books, and this is okay. I have a conspiracy theory. In Polish,
Okay.
if you search up Wiedźmin Tom Pierwszy, which means The Witcher Book 1, you will get this book, The Last Wish. If you search up Wiedźmin Tom Trzeci, which means The Witcher Book 3, you'll get Blood of Elves. If you search up in English, The Witcher Book 1, guess what shows up? Blood of Elves. In my theory, my theory is that from the publisher's perspective, it's going to just to respond to Capricious Fox here.
Let me read it out loud really quickly. So it says,
Mhm.
Vera is it true?
Sapkowski.
Sapkowski, thank you. Praise the Brazilian Portuguese translation. I saw that claim on a subreddit a while back when Googling about translations. Go ahead.
So I'm not sure, but a bunch of my commenters on my Witcher videos turned out to be from Brazil. And I'm like, whoa, that's unexpected. And it turned out that I'm not sure if Sapkowski said anything about it, but the translation apparently is very good. So if you can read in Portuguese, read it in Portuguese, because apparently it keeps the soul of the story. But going back to now the thing here, my conspiracy theory is if you go to Amazon and if you search up like The Witcher as a bundle, you will get the bundle of the short stories, books 1 and 2, and then you'll get the novels as their own thing. I think that they did that just because it's more expensive for you to buy 2 bundles instead of one big bundle that has the entire series. Does that make sense? But that's just so bad, because that's misleading in the marketing, because loads of people will pick up book 3, what the author intended to be book 3, what is sold in my country, its country of origin, as book 3. No one calls it book 1. No one. Like when I learned that it's being sold as book 1, I was like, what? Because what? You don't know anything about the politics. You don't know anything about the characters. You're thrust in. It's so crazy to me. Like the best way that I can compare it, the best thing I could compare it to is, you know how in the Wheel of Time, after book 3, like stuff happens, there's a fundamental shift. And book 4, you're totally new region. You already know the characters, you know the tensions, and then like bigger like plot conflict of, okay, things are getting real. We have to do this. You know how that's like what book 4 is? Like a fundamental shift. That's what the 3rd book is. Like by the 3rd book, you have to know everything. By the 3rd book, it's the 3rd book. Like you wouldn't start Lord of the Rings with Return of the King. You wouldn't.
Right.
Do you? I get really angry about this because it's so sad. Anyway.
No, it's funny. When I was trying to figure out how to read the series, I Googled it and I kept seeing different opinions from different people. And so I
read the
kind of
short story collections
me.
first. I read the Last Wish and then the second short story collection. Then I went to Blood of Elves. Is that aligned with what you think you should do?
No, yeah, that is the
correct word.
The fact that like when I started, I think I discovered this from Elliot Brooks. She has a great video explaining the entire situation. But when I saw that video about the Witcher reading order, I was like, what? The Witcher reading order? Just read book 1, then book 2, then book 3, etc. till book 7. And when you read book 7 and you decide you want some more, read the prequel if you want,
weird.
I guess.
Yeah.
Like, what's so hard about that? And then she was like, yeah, so this is actually numbered as book 1, but it's book 3. And I was like, why would you do that? Why would you do that? That's so crazy.
Yeah.
So
that's crazy.
Yeah.
Like
that's my experience with it. I had to like research multiple times because I would see conflicting like reading orders of stuff. So yeah, I totally see. Yeah.
Yeah.
As a Polish person, The Last Wish is book 1. It's not the first short story collection. It's book 1.
Okay.
A short story collection is just a different medium of conveying a story than a novel.
Yeah.
And I watched Dr. Philip Chase's and Dr. A.P. Canavan. I don't know if it's doctor or professor. I'm not too sure. I'm sorry.
That's
but
okay.
I watched their lecture series about, like, analyzing books and kind of like an intro to that they did earlier this year, which I loved it so much. I commented on like every video. I loved it.
Nice.
And where was I going? Oh yes, and in one of them, they introduced me to this thing called an embedded narrative. And the way The Last Wish is at the very start, we find out that Geralt is recovering from a heinous neck injury, and he's in this temple and whatever. And then as people come and visit him, he remembers things from the past. It's kind of like the Gunslinger. This is another piece of beef that I have. Why do we refer to this as a short story collection and we don't refer to the Gunslinger as a short story collection? Because those two, it's the same thing. It's in the Dark Tower, book 1, the Gunslinger, it's Roland traveling through the desert after the Man in Black. And as he goes into a town or whatever, he remembers like a memory or whatever. And then there's like a backstory or whatever, and so you have the frame narrative and then the embedded narrative, which I believe that was called hypodiegetic, right?
Good
Because
job.
I say that
That's yeah,
Professor
that's good.
Philip Chase.
I just call it
Sorry,
frame
Philip.
narrative, where the frame
Um,
is the outer story, and then you're telling the inner story. So, there's a lot of
yes,
books that do that, and
exactly.
I love that device usually. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's just all it is. Like there
Yeah.
is like the story of him getting healed. Like it's not a big part of it, but technically that's the story. Now, Sword of Destiny, just short stories, but the timeline doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Nothing matters. The only thing that matters is the character relationships that are developing. Also, the second short story collection, like all you need to understand, which I think is very obvious, is that the last short story, which is called Something More, is the short story that's like right before the start of Blood of Elves. And I think that's very obvious. You can't miss that.
Yeah.
It, like, I don't know. I feel like people overcomplicated this so much and it turns off people from the series. I think it also gives wrong expectations when starting the series. I don't know. The book guy made a really good video on this, Kronk, the book guy, where I think he sets expectations fairly well. So if you're interested in starting the series and want to have good expectations, watch that video.
Oh, he's great. He was on Why Read, a
I
previous
saw,
episode
yeah.
too. Yeah, fantastic. Well, and I have to share Dom's comment here because he says your passion is contagious and very sincere, very demure, very mindful. I have to agree with that too. And Philip,
Thank you.
also, it's okay to call us Philip and AP. So, yeah.
Okay.
Um, so, as I understand it, by the way, speaking of Philip and AP, I happen to be in a read along with them of The Wars of Light and Shadow by Jenny Wirtz. And Tom, how far are you into that series? I know you're taking a little bit of a break.
Yeah, the first three books. I'm up. The next one I'll do is Fugitive Prince. So I guess it technically depends on where you are. If, what is it? Ships of Merior and Warhorse of Vastmark. If those are two books or one. I think in the UK they're one book or something.
Yeah, so that's
Yes.
also a series where it's confusing as
Yes.
far as like the way that they were published, and then there are various arcs in it, and I
Hmm.
always screw it up when I talk about it. So I try my best just to think of it as an 11-book series, and
Yeah.
yeah, it's confusing though for sure.
Yeah. So the next one will be Fugitive Prince.
Okay,
Is
got it.
the one I'll be on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
So, Vera, did I see correctly? I hope it's okay for me to share this. Are you going to be reading that?
Yeah, I was invited by the lovely John from Talking Story, Captain Tingle.
Captain Tingle.
That's good.
Yeah,
Well,
I was so honored to get
if
that
you all
message from
don't know, then
him.
you just have to subscribe, and you'll experience it.
You'll
Okay.
Yeah.
feel the tingle.
The
Yeah.
tingle.
Yeah, so he messaged me if I wanted to start it, and I did. And so he invited me to do the read along with him. I think Brian from Belltube, he's going to be doing that as well. And so that's starting in January, I believe.
Nice.
I'm excited. I'll be texting you guys because I'm
Yes.
scared I'll be lost.
Oh no, I don't think you'll have a problem with the. So a lot of people compare it to Malazan because it's like this long series, but I mean Tom can also speak from his experience very well too. I would say they're very different in that sense.
Yeah.
Will you want to speak on that, Tom?
I can't. Yeah. So it is funny because I do compare them to each other. Mostly in the fact that I always say that these are series that like deserve your full attention and that require a little bit more out of you as a reader compared to something that's I don't like lighter, I guess is a word that you could use. And not to say that those are bad or not as valuable or anything, but it just requires a little bit more. I mean, her prose is very dense and rich and I always say her writing is like on another plane of existence. At least in my experience, it's so good, but it is very different. And so I think that does kind of add into the needing to be a little bit more care. There's a little bit more care you need to have when reading it, but the complexity of it is definitely different than like Malazan for sure. Yeah. Though I do
Yeah,
compare
Would
them
you say
I compare
more
them all
or
the time.
less?
it's
The
far
world,
less.
I would say it's definitely way less. I think some of it'll just depend on how how used you can get to her prose. Because for me, I don't know how if you have the same experience. Once you get into the flow of it, it's fine. But because it's so different, sometimes it can be a little jarring for me to go to it. just because it is so different. But once I get back into reading it and I'm used to it again, I can flow through it perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Tom, if you could give me 2 pros and 2 cons for why someone might like the series or might not like the series, what would they be?
Okay, so the cons, I'm gonna completely cheat here and say one, that there's only an audiobook for like the first and the last book. So if you're kind of like me and you're normally an audiobook person, there isn't for most of the books. Another con, uh, I will say it's a little bit slower than I think some people will be used to. I think, and some of this is just reading taste. Like some people don't like something that is as methodical and building as the series is. It really builds up to some of these like big moments and climaxes that are going to happen. And for some people, they're just not going to have the patience or the want to do it. Not that they can't do it, but they just might not want to put in that kind of effort to it. And that's also kind of like a selling point at the same time for me, is that it is building to like these epic, beautiful moments. Like some of my favorite moments in all of fantasy are in these books. So like for me, that's a huge positive. And then just another one is that it is a huge scaling story that is going. I'm only 3 books in, so I don't know exactly where it's going to go, but it just feels like it's such a big, expansive world that there's going to be so much to explore that I think that's a huge positive as well.
That's amazing. Yeah. What about you, Joanna? Do you have any pros and cons?
I do, yeah. So I would say that I would echo so much of what Tom just said. So when it comes to the complexity of the story, I think if you compare it to Malazan, the story in Malazan when you're reading it, especially as a first time reader, I would say, because things come together and you understand it more. I think when you get the whole picture, is far more complicated because it's far more sprawling. You have more continents, more settings, you have more characters, tons and tons, hundreds and literally hundreds and hundreds of characters in the
So
Malazan
many.
series. Uh, and then in various storylines, it jumps around quite a bit. With Wars of Light and Shadow, the story is not so much sprawling. There is a world called Athera, and there are a variety of locations that that are developed for sure, but it's not as much sprawling as in expanding outward, and the cast is far more contained than Malazan, even though there is a multi POV cast. But it's centered around 2 brothers for the most part. So we're really focused with the character work, we're really focused with the setting, and the storyline is one that the way it was described to me is it spirals inward rather than outward. And I think that's a good way to
Interesting.
put it. So you read book 1, and then I know some people criticize book 1 as the story being maybe a little bit basic. I don't wanna say that. That sounds like too mean. That's too pejorative. Not not anything, out of this
It's
world, I
not
guess, or
revolutionary.
not revolutionary, that's a better word. I couldn't think of a word that didn't sound mean or derogatory, but it's not something that feels revolutionary. It's kind of like the good and evil trope. But I actually love book 1. I thought book 1 was actually really cool, so that especially with what it does with the curse. But then every book that follows it goes back over things that happened in book 1 and builds something new and then kinda layers back. So it keeps going out and in at the same time, and that is really, really cool the way it does that. I I will say though that the prose is a learning curve. It is something that if you're not somebody who visualizes what you read, Jenny Wirtz's writing is going to be a challenge for you. She herself has said that. Her writing is not for people who have aphantasia. I'm sure some people who have aphantasia can still get behind her prose, but if you don't really visualize what she's writing on the page, it can be a little bit of a challenge. Her sentences are quite long, quite complex compared to Sanderson or a lot of the more modern prose styles that you see today. So she has a very she's very gifted though with her wordplay. She has, I would say, the best diction of any fantasy writer that I've ever read from, in the sense that there have been numerous times where I've been reading her books and I've come across a specific word that I don't know, and I look up what the word means. It's a word I've never heard of. I'll look up what the word means, and it is always so perfectly fitting to what she's describing. It's not
Hmm.
like it's fitting. It's like there's no other word that would be more perfect to convey what she's conveying in that passage. So she is exceptionally gifted with her wordplay, with her writing, but it can be a challenge at times. It's not something that you can go through quickly. And she does that intentionally. She wants you to have a slower reading experience. I would also say that the pacing in the books can be quite slow at times. And I say that as somebody who tends to enjoy slow burn books. The last book that I just read for me was very slow paced, in my opinion. Um, and I would also say that when it comes to character work, I I think there are some characters I have a bias towards. I do find, and this is just me, I think I'm probably the only one I know of who feels this way. I tend to have a bias towards her female characters over her male characters, though there are a couple of male characters I've really enjoyed. And the other thing I would say is that nobody writes nature descriptions better than Jenny Wirtz, in my opinion. She's unparalleled when
Oh
it
yeah.
comes to beautiful nature descriptions and really cool ethereal magic. She also has a magic system that is based on metaphysics of the world, where you're combining light, shadow, color, emotion, music. It's all part of the same spectrum of frequency, and she combines that pretty well into the story too.
Yeah.
Actually, Joanna, sorry to jump in. Music. I watched your interview with Brian Bell, and I think Brian is such a he's so good at that. Like, I watched your video, Tom, as well. But I loved how Joanna, yours and Brian's video became so much about music. And I just wanted to tell you that I was in a band for 6 years, and I played the flute.
Oh,
And
that's
I
so
feel
cool.
one of the things that hurt me the most is that I haven't been able to continue with that after high school because of like time commitments and
Oh,
whatnot. But
yeah.
it was so good. It was so therapeutic to me. And man, when I could like get a run of, I don't know, some like random triplets in the middle of a song or 16th notes that just were killing me, I was like, yeah, it was so good. I loved it. So
Yeah. Oh, well, that's wonderful, and I hope that you pick it up again. I hope that you
yeah.
pick it up again. Yeah. I sorry, I hope I didn't ramble on too long about Words of Light and Shadow, but I am gonna be so curious to hear your thoughts when
Oh
y'all
yeah.
start that read along for
Yeah.
sure.
That read. So I'm behind your guys' read along, but it's nice every time I finish, I get to watch yours, and now I'll get to watch theirs too. So it's nice.
Yeah, and I will say that discussing the books has been a huge pleasure for me. Like talking about the books with AP and Philip has certainly enriched my experience. So I think that you're going to have some wonderful discussions. And it sounds like Jenny Wirtz is going to be joining your discussions from what I hear. So um, I'm sure that that will also be fantastic too. Uh, Yay. Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, it's Wars of Light and Shadow, kind of like what we were saying earlier. It's one of those series that I'm like, very specific about how I pitch it and
Yeah.
who I think would be the intended reader because it's not typical modern fantasy. You know what I mean? Of what's what's largely selling right now. But I still think it has its audience for a reason, for sure.
So, just a clarification question. Would you say that the learning curve is mostly because of the writing style and the pacing?
It's the
Okay.
writing style.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
100%. Yeah.
Okay.
Um, yes.
Yeah.
I find that go ahead,
I
Tom.
was gonna say, I was gonna use Sanderson's like window analogy. He talks about how his prose is like supposed to just be a plain window that you can see through to see his world. And if you're gonna stick with that analogy, her prose is almost like a stained glass window that is also painting its own picture, or something like that. Maybe if that analogy is coming through.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And here again, as a non-visual reader, it would get difficult. Yeah. I think it's gonna be hard if are you somebody who visualizes what you read, Vera?
Yeah, I try. Yeah, I most of the time, yes. For Malazan, it was really hard for me. But other than that, yeah.
Yeah. Then I think that's a huge factor, I would say. But yeah, I think that's like the number one thing for me. And some days, like when it comes to Words as Prose, I have days. I have good days and bad days. Sometimes I read her writing and I can sink into the rhythm because there is a very specific rhythm to the way she writes. And sometimes I could just sink into it and flow with it, and the pictures are unfolding beautifully. And I'm vibing with it, I'm feeling it, I'm loving it. And then other days I read her prose and I'm like, I have to reread the same sentence
Exactly the same.
10 times.
Exactly the same. I think when I did my Ships of Merior review, I think I read that book for like 275 days. Like that's how long it took me to finish that book. And part of it was I took a break or two, but in general, I just read it really slow, and I enjoyed it so much to read it that slow. It wasn't like I think a lot of people would see that and be like, "That's horrible." But for me, it was great. Even if I only read like 2 or 3 pages a day, it was great.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
her sentence structure is very long. It's something I noticed a lot, especially in Ships of Merrier for some reason. I didn't notice it as much in this last book I read, but it could be just I'm not noticing it as much for whatever reason. She tends to enjoy very long introductory phrases to sentences before we get to the subject. So it'll be like, what's a good example? With a swift and joyful demeanor, da da da, the person. And so it's like this long description before you get to the person did this, or the weather did this, or you get to the subject of the sentence. So I always like I noticed for a while there, there was even a point where I got to a point at in one of the books where I noticed it's happening so often that I would kind of skip around in the sentence and jump to, "What are we talking about? Okay, now I'll go back to the beginning of the sentence."
Yeah.
Because she has that, and it's part of the rhythm, I think, of her writing too, so
Yeah. Quick question for you, Joanna. So I know you were struggling a little bit with, do you pronounce it Dunkar? Is that how you guys
Oh,
say it?
Dakar, yes.
Dakar? Okay,
My
yeah.
least favorite character. I don't
Yes,
like
I
that
know.
character.
I was going
Yeah.
to say, are you still struggling with him? Because I know you had asked me, I think at one point, how I felt about him, and I felt more similar to you. And I was
Yes.
curious on if that was still how you were feeling with
That
him.
is a character I've had a lot of issues with personally because
Hmm.
and keep in mind that these books started being written in I think the first publication date was 93, so I think part of it could be just when it was written, it was a different time, you know what I mean? Taking
Hmm.
that into consideration. But there is a character where I feel like a lot of the writing is, um highlighting the fact that he's a heavier set character, and I feel like a lot of the humor there's a lot of humor surrounding his weight being a heavier character, and I just don't vibe with that humor. I guess I can also say that about the series. There is a lot of slapstick humor and a lot of humor regarding this character specifically that it just it's not to my liking at all. Like, I don't personally care for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, what this kind of sounds like is so I was motivated by my parasocial relation to Mike, who doesn't know I exist. But through
He
this
was in the chat
parasocial,
earlier. He knows
oh,
you
yeah,
exist.
never mind, he knows I exist now. But through
Yeah.
this parasocial relation that I've had with him, um, he really motivated me to pick up more Stephen King. And I, at the start, because he was doing this series of Into the Multiverse, and I was like, wow, this is so sick. I'm going to do this. And I started reading in publication order everything. And something that I really enjoy Stephen King. Just saying this right
Yeah.
now. Really enjoy Stephen King. It's something that took me out of some of his earlier books, especially was how he would, for example, I'm going to use this example because everyone knows this example, but in The Shining, uh, it was Jack. It was Jack. As he kind of, as his mentality descends and he becomes crazy, like a way that King demonstrates that Jack is becoming evil is by making him use like really racist language.
Mm,
And I understand, like, my perspective on this is I understand that it was written at the time, and I understand that I'm reading it now. However, it still like makes me really uncomfortable. And
yes.
so, like, it's, I don't think we should judge, I don't know, past works by like moderns. Well, I don't know, maybe you should sometimes, but we shouldn't like take them out of the context in which they were written, but at the same time, if it does make me as a modern reader uncomfortable, like it will decrease my enjoyment of the book, you know what I mean? And so what you're saying about this description of the character, Dakar, was it, right?
Yeah.
That kind of sounds like my experience with early King, because that like phases out, but at the start. Yeah.
Yes. It's I always have to take that into consideration. I'm like, I know I'm coming at this from a more modern perspective, but I sometimes I just can't get past that. And with this character, I will say, and I'm not saying this in defense or in the sense that I like can get past it because of this, but I do think it's worth noting too that I think she's trying to paint this character as a sidekick kind of character and using some fat shaming humor to do that is part of the strategy to paint this as like, oh, this is the sidekick, so that later on the character can show you as a reader, like, oh, well, this character is just as heroic and powerful. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, kind of setting it up so that you can switch your mind about him. But
Yeah.
I still can't quite. I just don't
He's a
like him.
character I wonder
Yeah.
about. I'm super curious about where he's like. Obviously, I'm only 3 books in, but I just feel like there's got to be something that's going to happen with him at some point. That is, so he's a character I think, even though he's definitely not my favorite character or anything, he's definitely a character who gets an unproportional amount of my attention sometimes when I'm thinking about the series, because I'm just like, what is going to happen with him? Because he's more of an oddity compared to some of the other characters.
You know,
So I'm
it
kinda
kind of
curious.
reminds me a tiny bit of Krupp from Gardens of the
Okay.
Moon.
Yeah.
Tiny bit. So
Yeah.
a lot of people love Krupp, and it's not a fair comparison in a
Sure.
way. It's not a totally fair comparison, but I did not like that character.
Me either.
I just found him
Same.
annoying, at least in
Yep.
Gardens of the Moon. I changed my mind in Memories of Ice.
Okay.
And you will probably know, Tom, what scene I'm talking about, but there was a certain scene
Yes,
that
I
made
think
me
I know.
realize I think I care about this character.
Yeah.
But before that, I just didn't like him.
I was the same. I did not. Gardens of the Moon, I was like, what? I think I even was talking to somebody and I was like, what is going on with this guy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, my heart was stolen by Crocus.
Oh, yes,
My
Crocus is
boy.
great. I loved Crocus too. I know he actually gets a lot of hate too sometimes. But I loved him.
By
I know.
who? I'll beat him up.
I
No,
don't know.
I won't actually. That was a joke, but like,
Yeah.
he's the best
know.
character. I'm sorry. I love
Yeah.
him.
Yeah.
He's my little boy.
Yeah, I don't know. And I will say though, with Dakar, I think he bothered me the most in Ships of Merrier, but then he also kind of bothered me in one of the last books, not the last book I read, because fortunately he didn't have that much page time. But yeah, I don't know. It's just a personal thing for me. And I mean, I think that's okay. Like that's the thing about epic fantasy is you're doing so many different things that even a super fan is probably not gonna love everything you do,
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I also don't think that you need to like love every single book in a series to love a series. Like for me, the Witcher books, none of them. My highest rated one is 4.25 stars.
Oh wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it's still the most important series in my life.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would say it's my favorite. Like my favorite trilogy at this point is Age of Madness, but it's the most important in my life. And the fact that I didn't give any of these books 5 stars or even 4.5, I don't think that decreases.
Yeah. No,
I don't know. What do you think about that?
I completely agree, because I have the same kind of feeling with like The Expanse in particular. I think there are a couple books in there that are just like, they're good, they're fine. Like there's 3 or 4 Expanse books that have like 3-star ratings for me, and it's probably my second favorite sci-fi series though, as like a whole. So I don't think that like, and I do this with a lot of series, that they end up just being like one giant book, even though they're very specifically not. But that happens to me a lot, where I look at the whole thing in totality, and by the end I'm like, I'll have a different feeling about the series as a whole compared to like the individual components of it, for sure.
Yes, absolutely agree with this. I think I got a couple of questions. I wanted to answer one here about Jack Vance, because there was a question about Jack Vance's books, and I only read one. I read The Dying Earth, it's kind of like a short story. So I read the short story of The Dying Earth earlier this year, which is part of the larger collection. And his writing style is very rich. He
Okay.
wrote, I think it was like published in the 1950s, and it's a really interesting story to read, especially as it was very influential on the genre. It was very influential on George R. R. Martin, for example, and many other writers. There's even a tribute novel to Jack Vance's Dying Earth, and there's been a lot of Dying Earth sci fantasy since he wrote that series. So,
Okay.
yes, it's amazing for its sci fantasy world building. And at the same time, the characters are extremely flat. So you have to be okay with the fact that the story is more about the themes and the dying earth idea and the world itself than it is about having three-dimensional psychologically intriguing characters. It's just not that kind of story. But I still thought it was beautifully written, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed my time with that one.
Hmm. I haven't
And
heard
there's
of
another
this.
question we got here too, and I'm sorry I'm so behind on this, but I did start it. And that is, Vera, have you read Mythago Wood? It does sound like it has a lot of stuff with paganism. I got a friend who teaches at the University of um,
Białystok.
thank you. I could not say
Yeah.
that word. And she ranks Robert Holdstock as one of her favorite authors. Have you read it?
I haven't, unfortunately. I think I have been definitely recommended Mythago Wood. Haven't read it yet. I maybe hopefully will in the future. Um, but I love Białystok. It's so great. You can see loads of bisons. So if you go to Poland, go see the bisons in Białystok.
Oh, wow.
Hmm.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah.
Good to know. And then
Yeah.
we also had another question here from our friend Laura from Fantasy Awash. I think I heard Vera say in her algorithm video that she is Polish, also Polish here, wondering where her fam are from.
Yeah. So my family was from like the regions around Warsaw. Uh, from they were so like my grandparents on both sides of my family were the first members of the family to go from like the little if you played The Witcher 3, think White Orchard, that exact kind of vibe, obviously, with like bricks and not like, well, there are some wooden houses there still, but they went from those kind of areas outside of Warsaw and then they moved to Warsaw. And I grew, I lived my first 4 years of my life in Warsaw, and then I lived the next like 5 to 6 in the UK, and then I lived the next 10 in Warsaw, and now I live in Ireland. So I am a proud Warszawianka, which means
Wow.
girl from Poland, girl from Warsaw. Yeah.
Cool.
Nice.
Very cool.
Yeah, where are can if Fantasy Awash can type it out, then I'm curious where you're from. So, you know.
Yeah, I don't know if she's from I don't think she's quite from Poland. I know she lived
Oh,
in
okay.
Canada and now she's living in the US, but yeah, Fantasy Wash, if you're still around, please share with us anything about your background. We'd love to hear from it. And let's see here. Oh, I feel so bad. I'm the worst. I'm the worst for being a Crook hater. I did like him more as I went on, but I did not start out liking him.
Yeah.
Uh, this is just a bad taste on my part maybe, but, yes. And same with Pust. I did not like this girl, Pust,
Hmm.
initially, and then I did like him, especially when his wife is introduced in the series, so oh, here we
Okay.
go. She says here that her family is from Warsaw, and is she
Warszawa. Yeah,
cool.
Warsaw and Kraków. Um, yeah, fun fact. I don't know if Fantasy Awash likes Taylor Swift, but I'm a huge Taylor Swift fan. I have my little jumper here. And if you are a Taylor Swift hater and you like Polish people, stop being one, because I was at the tour and she spoke so much Polish to us and she like did all the conjugations as well. And I was like, girl, why are you learning this? But she was like, Siema Warszawa and stuff. And so, anyway,
Oh, that's
sorry.
That
cool.
is cool.
Yeah, it was so,
Yeah.
sorry for the interjection.
Yes. No, that's fine. She said that you need to read the When the Dark Stands Still. It's a Polish
Do
folklore
a little
story.
photo.
So,
Thank you.
yeah. Um, have you gotten to the bison scene in I don't think I have yet. That shows you how behind I am in reading this book. I've been really I've unfortunately, I'll just go ahead and share this. I don't see why not. I had a really tough week, y'all. Our cat passed away and very suddenly on Thursday morning.
Oh no.
So,
I'm
it kind of
sorry.
derailed my reading a little bit. So I had a hard time processing it. Um, yeah, so I got behind. I'm behind now in my TBR, but I am loving the book, and oddly, I was reading a very poignant scene with an animal companion when I got that news, so
Well,
yeah,
I'm so
yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
I
It's
know.
I had a pet that passed away last month as well, so I
Oh,
empathize with your pain.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry for
I
you
understand.
too. I'm
Yep.
But
sorry.
I'm sorry that, such a you just had such a difficult week, and um,
Yep.
especially with that scene. So,
Yep.
Yeah.
I feel
yeah.
you. We had to put down last week our dog who was 19 and a half years old.
Oh my
So
gosh, I'm so
yeah,
sorry.
yeah. So no, I definitely feel
That's
your pain.
awful.
The animal. Yeah, I definitely feel
Oh,
with you. Yeah.
oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah.
No, I'm
We have
sorry
a
for you. Yeah.
we have a boxer who is a boxer mix who is pushing 14, 12 or maybe 12 years old.
Hmm.
And that's pushing it for a boxer. And she's arthritic. She's getting up there in
Oh,
age. So we were preparing for that. We were thinking, okay, that's
Yeah.
gonna come at some point. But we didn't think our cat would leave us so soon. And so it was
Yeah.
pretty devastating. Yes, his name was Bagheera. Yeah. Um, yes. Well, thank you all. Oh, nice. Hello, Jenny Words. Yay.
hi.
Oh,
Big hugs to you
thank
too.
thank you.
Uh, it was yes, and, by the way, I should highlight that too about Wars of Light and Shadow. Um, Incredible detail when it comes to Jenny Wirtz's equestrian knowledge is unparalleled as well. So if you like horses, she gives such wonderful, beautiful attention to the horses in that series as well. Yeah, oh my goodness. Yeah, I love that cat. It was pretty sad, especially for my husband too, because my husband treated that cat. We don't have kids, and my husband would hold the cat like a baby, and like,
Oh.
and so it was kind of like a special thing for me because I'm like, that's the closest I'll ever see, my husband having that child father bond, and so it was always very endearing to me to see that. But yes, my heart goes out to both of you too for having recently lost wonderful animal companions too, because
Yeah, you too, for sure. It's definitely
Yeah, you
it's
too.
always it's always hard.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's really, really tough. Um, yeah, it makes me think though about all the pretty horses, that beautiful quote that you were sharing though, about like
Yeah.
sharing through understanding or the power of understanding. Gosh, what a great book, by the way.
What a great
Yes.
book.
Mhm. Yes.
Yes.
So, I think maybe we're coming upon a good time to close the episode, but before I leave you two, maybe I could ask you to anything we can look forward to on your channels that might be up and coming. So, Tom, let's start with you. Anything we can expect
Uh,
from you, and it's okay if you don't
yeah.
know.
No, the next thing I will probably do is there is a tag going around right now, the Honest Booktuber tag, and I have really enjoyed watching people do that one, so I
Good
think I
tag.
might do that.
Mhm.
And then also, I just finished The Mercy of the Gods by James S. A. Corey, and I think I'm more positive on it than a lot of other people have been, so I'll probably do a review for that and talk about what works for it, things that will work for people in it, and kind of set people's expectations for it. Because I think a lot of people went into it expecting more of The Expanse, and that is definitely not what that book is. So
So you're setting expectations in check.
yeah,
Always love
yeah,
that.
yeah. Because I think it's
Great.
easy to do with an author like that, where they just had this big epic 9, 10 book series with all those short stories in it, and people just kind of want that same thing again, and it's not. So yeah,
Yeah. Good. Yeah, cool. Well, I'm looking forward to that. I haven't read The Expanse. I only read book 1 in The Expanse, I'll correct myself,
okay.
and I really enjoyed it. I don't know why, it just never felt compelled to continue,
Oh yeah,
um,
yeah.
but I have heard great things about Mercy of the Gods, even though, like you said, some people might struggle with their expectations, so that's
Yeah,
good.
it definitely has its flaws too. So like I get it, but I think going in it with it the proper expectations can definitely help.
Do you think that if I can't commit to another big series, I could start my James S.A. Corey journey with Mercy of the Gods, or should I
Yeah, no, I think you
Oh,
could
go
for
with
sure.
this
Yeah,
one?
yeah,
Okay,
I think because
interesting.
it's going to be a trilogy, and obviously that one just came out, so it'll probably be a year or something at least before the next one comes out. And I think it shows that like their skill set of like how even though it's two people, it doesn't feel you don't really feel two distinct voices.
Mhm.
They very much blend together really well and feel like kind of one author. So yeah, I think it would be a decent if you don't want to commit to 9 books. I think.
mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And by the way,
Oh,
Fantasy Watch
absolutely.
says here that you two are going to have to do a video about Wind and Truth, which I might pick it up. I don't know. I'm not in a rush. I'm not in a rush, but I might pick it up as well. Yeah, go ahead, Vera. What about you?
Yeah, so for me, I'm really on my Cormac McCarthy train, my king. So I want to finish up those last 2 books that I need to read for that video and make a video about that. The Farseer trilogy, though, I'm kind of nervous about the reception for that video
Oh
because
no,
man, I
you're not
really hope I
alone.
love AskQuest. Or Assassin's Quest. Sorry, that's how. So my friends and I, we just shorten it to that. So sorry, that was sorry. Yeah, I really hope I love Assassin's Quest. um, and I
I
really
don't
hope I
think
like
I don't
Royal Assassin.
I don't know if you will.
Oh no.
I will say that Assassin's Quest might have been my least favorite in that trilogy. Hate to say that. But, I mean, there's still really powerful moments in it. There are really excellent moments in it, but there are definitely flaws with it, and I didn't quite see them all until later in some ways, but I also think it's incredible. But I love the whole trilogy, so I'm not the right
Yeah.
person to ask too. But I think
Um,
if talking to you, if you were to give me the question, should I read Assassin's Quest? I'm not enjoying Royal Assassin. I didn't like Assassin's Apprentice. I would probably say no. I'd probably say it's probably not for
I'm
you.
committed.
But if you're
I'm
committed,
committed.
then talk to Jerry. Then you have to talk to Jerry, and she will
I
help you through it. That's what I'll say about
Yeah.
that.
So
I
those
did
are
have
like
one
the two
more
big videos I
I
have
did have one more
planned.
question for you about that, because you do a lot of themed videos. Do you ever find yourself burning out a little bit? I mean, obviously, that might be the case right now with Robin Hobb, but because you are putting things back to back, like lots of McCarthy in a row to do a themed video, lots of Irish books to do a themed video, as an example, do you find that that works pretty well for you, as far as the variety is concerned, or
So in the past, I couldn't stick with series, and so Joe Abercrombie once again changed my life. Actually, if Johan is still watching, I am.
Uh-oh,
Nope.
lost your audio. It's muted right now. Try it again.
Is, is it a? Is it okay, or is it like really bad?
It's really, really quiet, but it's something.
How about now?
That's it.
Nope. There
Yes,
you go.
got it.
Perfect. No, I was going to make a joke that I'm offended that since Johan met Joe Abercrombie, he didn't tell Joe Abercrombie that I really want a devil's arc, but it's okay. He didn't know I was then, so I
It's
guess he can have a pass. Um, no, yeah, sorry, I went off track with Joe Abercrombie again. So yes, do I get burnt out? I never stuck with series until I forced myself to stick with First Law, and I realized that I really missed reading series back to back or authors back to back like I did when I was way younger. And so and I also really like just to get to know an author and their body of work, and yeah, do that deep dive. So it works for me for now.
That's great. Yay. Okay, I just had to ask about that, um, and I just wanna say again that I've been really enjoying, all your content. I love that you have all those topic videos, and Tom, always love your content too.
Thank you.
I've been really enjoying that. By the way, Tom did a fantastic video yesterday that I haven't had a chance to comment on, but I did watch it, and it was a fantasy for everyone. So he went through a huge list of fantasy books for different tastes throughout the video, which I thought was really clever. And I know that was
Yeah.
probably in response to the previous video you did on books that you love that you don't recommend to everyone.
Yeah, they were kind of companion, kind of loosely related. Yeah.
Kind of loosely related. Yeah. Yeah.
I kind of want to steal a video from you, Tom, if you give me permission. I really loved your video about like the books that made you a reader.
Oh yeah.
And I want to steal that idea
Oh,
if you give me
absolutely.
permission.
Absolutely.
I was thinking it also like fits Philip's Dear Dr. Fantasy too. So it's like when he asks you a question, you're going to be prepared because you'll have all those lists
Oh,
from the
yes.
video.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Yes, this has been absolutely lovely. If for some weird, strange reason you're not subscribed to these two channels, which I'm sure you are, please make sure to subscribe. They are linked in the description below. Chat, you have all been so wonderful. Thank you for being so kind. I was a little bit nervous that my dear friend Evie wasn't here to moderate the chat, but fortunately, it's been a home run chat today. Like everybody's been super, super nice and wonderful and lovely and supportive. So we love you all so much. Yes, for binging. I do love binging series too. So yes, thank you all so much. Even with all the kind, respectful banter about Wheel of Time, I think that all went
Yes.
really, really well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
All right, and again, thanks for joining me, wonderful guests and wonderful chat. And
Thank you for having us.
Yes,
yes,
thank you.
great, and have a great rest of your day.